Chapter 1085. No. Seeing the exhausted Klemvox fall under Soren's hands, Naruto suddenly let out a roar full of unwillingness. He had planned everything to force Klemvox to this point, but he did not expect Soren to take the fruits of his labor. After Klemvox died, most of the divine power of death gathered on Soren's body, and then countless souls appeared as if they were worshipping the new king of the dead. A row of data appeared in front of Soren's eyes. King of the dead, Klemvox killed. Extracting target's soul power. You've received 18540,000 slaughter EXP. Target has divine power. Extracting target's divine power. You've received 270 divinity points. Divinity leveled up. You've broken through to greater divinity. Target has divine power. Extracting target's divine power. You've received 210 divinity points. A huge amount of divine power emerged. Because Klemvox was the king of the dead, the divine power that escaped after his death was very spread. Although Soren received most of it, a lot of it was scattered to others, among which Vivian and Lillian received the most. It was as if he had broken through some kind of limit. In an instant, Soren's figure floated in the air, and then the material plane trembled slightly, and the eternal slumber that had been broken was restored. At the same time, there was a burst of low chanting. A dark kingdom appeared behind Soren, and a majestic shrine was built in it. In the sky, there were shadow angels and otherworldly servants flying around the shrine. 3 huge reincarnation pools were paved with marble, and in the distance, there were rolling mountains. As if they had sensed something, countless heroic spirits and angels flew and prayed, and under the command of the otherworldly messenger, they let out joyful voices. Greater divinity. Naruto seemed to have thought of something, and his face became abnormally pale. The Shadow Kingdom appeared behind Soren. As if he had broken through some kind of critical point, Soren suddenly transcended the influence of the Avatar crisis on the gods, and his connection with the Kingdom of God seemed to be much closer than before. At least he could easily see the situation inside even if he could not enter the interior of the Kingdom of God. The divine power was unprecedentedly strong, and the impact of the Avatar crisis was resisted by Soren's divine power. While allowing Soren to connect with the Kingdom of God, he also felt a vast power of chaos emerged from the depths of the Sea of Chaos. This was the source of the outbreak of the Avatar crisis, and the source of chaos emerged from here. Seize target's divine power. Yours upgrade. Seize SSS. U SSS. Of S. U S's. Seize S's S's. You've obtained the Fate domain. Seize S. You've obtained the Order domain. Seize the target, Eternal Slumber domain. You've obtained the Eternal Slumber domain. Eternal Slumber was reactivated. King of the dead, Klemvox killed. Your divine domain of death has been upgraded. Your death domain has been strengthened. Compatibility, 98%. You possess the divinity of death. You have the slaughter domain. You have successfully obtained the King of the Dead divinity. An unprecedented amount of divine power surged into Soren's body. Just like when he killed Sirik last time, Soren had an indescribable level of compatibility that allowed him to absorb Klemvox's energy in a frenzy. This energy was so similar to his that the degree of compatibility was quite astonishing. 270 divinity points. 210 godhood points. As a god who had been in charge of the death pantheon for thousands of years, Klemvox had an astonishingly strong amount of divine power. This was something that had never happened before when he killed any god. No god could let Soren absorb so much divine power like Klemvox. And this was under the condition that a lot of divine power was distributed to others. Soren still obtained an astonishing amount of 210 divine power. If it was a complete set of divine power, it should be more than 300 points. A new, Eternal Slumber domain was activated. Klemvox only had 2 divine domains, which were dead and death. Most of the divine domains of death were gathered on him, so he was the king of the dead. In addition, Clemvox also had the domains of order, protection, fate, travel, and eternal slumber. However, it seemed that the travel domain did not have a high compatibility with Soren. Most of the other domains were integrated by Soren, but the power of the travel domain dissipated and was obtained by others. This was inevitable. No god was completely the same as others. Even gods with the same divine domain would have many differences in details. Great divinity. After killing Clemvox, Soren's power was unprecedentedly strong. Although he had not fully integrated yet, he had completely suppressed Naruto. Clear out all the undead nearby. Soren still maintained the avatar status. Killing Clemvox gave him more than 18 million slaughter EXP. Even if he had consumed a lot of it, it was enough to maintain the avatar status for a long time. A portal opened. Diamond golems appeared at the edge of the battlefield. At the same time, two huge magic constructs also appeared on the battlefield. Pursue the victory. It was better to pursue the enemy with courage than to follow the example of a tyrant. It was impossible for Sauron to let Nero go. This was the best chance. If Nero escaped, the multiverse was so big. What if Nero took back the original world? Soren. Princess Royal. Vivian and Lillian. Even the god of suffering, Ilmater, who was watching from the side, had faintly surrounded Naruto. Because just now, Soren sent a message to Ilmater, Naruto must pay for his evil deeds. Since the outbreak of the undead calamity, countless mortals have died because of his ambition. The eternal slumber will continue to exist. After I take over the divine domain of death, the undead calamity will end immediately. The river Styx will once again operate according to the ancient covenant. All of this should end. Whether it's us or the world, we have paid a huge price for this. We can't let Naruto escape. The god of suffering was an absolutely good god. And such a righteous god was undoubtedly convinced by Soren. Clemvox had completely fallen. All of this had to end because too many people had died. It had to be said. Sometimes, the good gods were really easy to make use of. Because when justice needed them, you only needed a little reason to persuade them to act. The premise was that they did not act against you. Chapter 1086. The Shadow God's kingdom appeared behind Soren. Because his speed of improvement was too fast, and his foundation was not as strong as the God of Lights, the scene behind Soren was only limited to the central temple, unlike the God of Light's seven-floored mountain paradise. But this also meant that his power was far beyond the other great gods. Soren had killed too many gods along the way, and most of them were related to death. This made Soren's accumulation of power in this area very large. Basically, the power of the three gods of death, except for Vivian and Lillian, had all gathered on Soren. At the same time, there were also powers from other gods. Naruto finally panicked a little. The situation had completely collapsed, and his luck seemed to have been used up all at once. After Soren snatched Clemvox's head, the god of suffering was also easily convinced. 1 against 4. There was almost no chance of winning. But just as Soren was about to make his move, a small accident happened. With the appearance of the light of divinity, the gods who were watching suddenly seemed to be ready to fight. Naruto. A beautiful woman with long black hair appeared at the edge of the battlefield and looked at Soren thoughtfully. Then she said, "You should pay for everything you've done." Lady of the Night, Shar. With the light of divinity, another god also appeared at the edge of the battlefield. The veiled Lady of Misfortune suddenly appeared and smiled at Soren. Then she said, "The ancient covenant of the gods cannot be betrayed. You should be judged by the gods." Golden lights appeared one after another. Just as Soren had the absolute advantage, the gods who were watching in the dark all appeared in their avatars, as if they could not wait to beat him up. What's going on? Brother. Why did they all suddenly appear? These gods were all in their avatars. They were afraid that Soren would misunderstand, and they were also afraid of Soren's power. Therefore, none of them came in their true forms. Soren quietly put some distance between them and said telepathically, "They're all here to pick peaches. Be careful. This group of bitches." How could Soren not guess Madame's intentions when she suddenly appeared that night? Naruto was different from Klemvox. His priesthoods were death, darkness, murder, and the underground world. Didn't he look familiar? That was right. Some of these priesthoods were compatible with the Lady of Night, and after she appeared, some vague figures appeared immediately. These were some gods of the evil camp spying on them. Are we just going to let them steal the fruits of our victory? Lillian seemed a little angry. Soren shook his head to appease her, then frowned and said, "It's not the time to fall out with them. Let's get rid of Naruto first and see who can get more priesthoods." Naruto's power was a little more mixed. He controlled the domains of darkness, murder, death, the underground world, and so on. At the same time, he also had the power of evil and arcane, which was very attractive to many gods. To put it bluntly, they came to see the situation and wanted to get some benefits back. Do it. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Soren immediately took the lead. As soon as he took action, the other gods also immediately took action, especially the Lady of Night, Shar. The avatar she sent seemed to be very powerful, and even had power that was not weaker than Vivian and Lillian. The light of arcane magic appeared. Just as the Lady of Night took action, the avatars of the Goddess of Magic and the Lady of Silvermoon suddenly appeared. Originally, they did not have any thoughts, but if the Lady of Night appeared, it would be completely different. But the moment the Goddess of Magic took action, a strange figure suddenly appeared behind her. Be careful. The Lady of Silvermoon let out a cry of alarm, but it was a little too late. The other party had a very strong arcane power. The Queen of Spiders, Lolth. It was a god with a very beautiful appearance. If it were not for the lower half of her body being a big spider, she would have been a stunning beauty. This was not the Queen of Spiders' original body, but it was also an existence similar to Soren's demon avatar. The Queen of Spiders had a core avatar, which was the spider elf form seen in front of them. She was the battle avatar of the Queen of Spiders and had about 70% of the strength of the original body. Most of the people present were the avatars of gods. The Goddess of Magic was in great danger when she was attacked. What was worse was that the Lady of Night suddenly showed a smirk on her face. She suddenly gave up on Naruto and rushed to the avatar of the Lady of Silvermoon. What are these bitches trying to do? Soren was a little confused for a moment, but this did not prevent him from taking Naruto's head. The Goddess of Misfortune seemed to really want Naruto to die. She assisted Soren to attack Naruto from the side. Facing the siege of the gods, Naruto had no chance at all. He was only able to withstand 3 rounds of attacks before he was seriously injured by Soren. But what Soren did not expect was that at the moment when Naruto was seriously injured and dying, a woman about 10 feet tall suddenly appeared behind Naruto. She was dressed in a loose black robe and wore a black feather mask on her face. Dense black feathers flowed from her face into the depths of her hood. Then she waved a strange circular blade and stabbed Naruto from behind. This weapon seemed to contain some kind of terrible power. In an instant, it destroyed Naruto's body. Then, countless rays of divine light exploded. Some of the power that represented death rushed to Soren, while a considerable amount of divine power was integrated into her body. Nightsinger. Damn it. Soren's face changed slightly, and he instantly put some distance between them. The Lady of the Night had 2 different forms. One was a nightsinger, and the other was a dark dancer. The one who appeared just now was the dark dancer, and the one who attacked was the nightsinger. She was the most terrible assassin and rogue in the multiverse. Her strength was much more dangerous than Soren's. Just as she attacked Naruto, an evil black power began to devour Naruto's divinity. It took away the power that represented darkness, murder, crafty approach, and subterranean world. This ancient goddess had a lot of divine titles, including but not limited to the Underdark, Night, Hatred, Loss, Oblivion, Sleep, Nightmares, Illusions, Lies, deception, unrevealed secrets, hidden places, betrayal, sinister, temptation, rogues, theft, murder, and winter. A strange dark light appeared. At the moment when Naruto fell, a hazy kingdom appeared behind the Lady of the Night. Great divinity. Soren thought about his own situation and immediately thought that the Lady of the Night might have broken through to the great divinity. This goddess had a secret divine title, so even if she had entered the great divinity, her divine kingdom, Shadow Realm, was still hazy. As if satisfied with the result of this battle, the Lady of the Night could not help but let out a chuckle. She then looked at Soren playfully and quickly disappeared. She must have been plotting for a long time. The Lady of the Night could grasp the timing so well. Soren was absolutely sure that the Lady of the Night had been plotting against Naruto for a long time. Even in her calculations, Soren could be used by her because it was difficult for her to absorb Clemvox's power, but there were too many things she could take from Naruto. Not far away, the avatars of the Goddess of Magic and the Lady of the Silver Moon were in danger. After seeing that the Lady of the Night had advanced to the great divinity and the appearance of the Nightsinger, the Goddess of Magic immediately cast a pleading look to Soren. However, Soren had fused with too much divine power of death and did not have the intention to fight with the Lady of the Night and the Queen of Spiders at the moment. In this case, the Goddess of Magic could only grit her teeth and quickly disperse her avatar with the Lady of the Silver Moon. No matter what, it was better to waste divine power than to have her avatar killed by the Lady of the Night. The current situation was not good for them. Let's go. The power of death in Naruto's body was fused with by Soren. Because too much power had just been obtained, Soren felt that his divine power was a little out of control. He looked at the Lady of the Night in the distance and said decisively, "The situation is settled. Let's get out of here first." At the moment of Naruto's death, although Soren did not get the last head, he also gained a lot of divine power. The Lady of the Night took some of it. However, Soren also gained about 130 points of divinity and 100 points of divine spark. Now that this power was a little beyond what he could bear, Soren had to find a way to fuse with the power of death. Sirik, Clemvox, and Naruto. The three powers of death were a little different, and Soren had to fuse with them to create his own profound meaning of death. Chapter 1087. Soren left decisively without any hesitation. This undoubtedly disappointed many of the gods who were secretly spying on them because this newly ascended god was simply too showy. They were happy to see Soren and Lady of Night have a fierce conflict. Whether there was a chance to gain benefits from it or not, they were happy to see both sides fight. But now they were undoubtedly disappointed because even if Lady of Night stole part of Naruto's priesthood and divine power, Soren did not want to fight with Lady of Night. Instead, he took his allies and left to avoid more accidents. Fight with Lady of Night? Fight with this ancient god who had existed since the birth of the material plane? Soren was not crazy. He was not a madman like Sirik. Even if he could temporarily suppress or even defeat Lady of Night, what was the point? What was present now was just her avatar. If he couldn't kill Lady of Night in one blow, he didn't know how much revenge the city of Mordor would suffer in the future. Looking at the priesthood of the Mistress of the Night, it was either assassination, conspiracy, or secret. Offending such a powerful and terrible enemy was an extremely passive thing for a new god like Soren who did not have a strong foundation. If Soren had been a god for hundreds of years, he would never retreat in today's situation. But Soren hadn't been a god for so long, and even the church had just been established. In this case, directly fighting with Lady of Night was tantamount to taking the old path of Sirik. God knew how many gods were waiting for Soren to reveal a flaw. As a new god, Soren had always avoided making enemies that were too powerful. In the presence of the Queen of Spiders and Lady of Night, he didn't want to fight with the enemy because he knew that sooner or later there would be a battle between Lady of Night and Lady of Silvermoon. First, he would fuse with the Death Priesthood. After he had officially advanced, he would have plenty of opportunities to make a move. The Lady of the Night and the Queen of Spiders had obviously joined forces, and this was probably because of Soren. As long as the Goddess of Magic was still alive, the Lady of the Night needed an ally, and the Queen of Spiders needed a powerful ally to deal with the elven pantheon. When Soren fully grasped the death divinity, he would be able to find an opportunity to take it back. Moreover, the Lady of the Night was also a person who acted on her own accord. Soren wasn't sure when the other party started to target Naruto. Maybe the attack on Mordor City some time ago was part of her plan. Such a dangerous opponent must have other trump cards. Sauron was now in a very bad situation. There were many gods who had their own ideas about how to quickly advance from a new god to a greater divine power. It could even be said that the current Soren was at his weakest, and it was also the time when they were most likely to kill Soren. Otherwise, when the Avatar crisis was over, there would be no gods who could threaten him. Even the God of Light would not be able to defeat Soren when he returned to his divine kingdom. Soren's departure was too decisive. Some gods who were secretly peeping to gain benefits were caught off guard and were instantly targeted by the Queen of Spiders and Lady of the Night. What a cunning little guy. The incarnation of the Queen of Spiders was a huge and beautiful spider elf. She looked at Soren's disappearing figure, licked her lips, and said, "Unfortunately, he is a very dangerous prey." She had been secretly watching Soren. The Queen of Spiders regretted not paying attention to Soren at the beginning, so that when she noticed that Soren was different, it was difficult to have a chance to kill him. The city of Mordor was almost impenetrable. Even if Lady of the Night planned to instigate an attack on the city of Mordor, they did not find any opportunity because the demons failed too quickly. The Queen of Spiders was a very vengeful god. She had always known that Soren had secretly taken in a group of drows who had betrayed her, and Soren would never have thought that there was an underground passage connected to the Underdark near the island of Mordor. If they had not resisted the attack of the demons at that time, the drows would have attacked here in an instant. Maybe it's just another Cyric. Lady of the Night's eyes had a trace of pride and malice. Her clergy had a certain conflict with Soren's, but even she did not have absolute confidence to deal with Soren. Even if she had some backup plans, now that Soren had retreated, she could not stop him. The result is good. The Queen of Spiders glanced into the distance and nodded. The Lady of Silvermoon and the Goddess of Magic have consumed at least 50% of their divine power. Lady of the Night chuckled and disappeared, and the Queen of Spiders also quickly dissipated. It was time for them to go back and share the loot. At the same time, just as Soren teleported back to Mordor, the incarnation of the Goddess of Agriculture also arrived. "You are very decisive." The figure of the Goddess of Agriculture appeared in the temple and smiled. "It is not a wise decision to fight Lady of the Night at this time. She is one of the ancient gods, and even my father is not sure if he can defeat her." Soren nodded, then shook his head and said, "Now is not the time. My father asked me to bring you a message." The Goddess of Agriculture was a little confused, but she still remembered the business and whispered, "Naruto used the benefits of the sticks in exchange for the support of the demons. The demons have never done anything without benefits. I am afraid that the situation in the underworld is very bad now. After you have merged with the power of death, it is best to recover the underworld as soon as possible." Soren immediately nodded and said seriously, "Within 3 days, I will start to act." Another important reason why she did not want to fight with other gods was that Soren had to recover the underworld as soon as possible. As long as the underworld was stable, the multiverse would not be too chaotic. Well, the Goddess of Agriculture seemed to sense something and whispered, "Then I will leave first. You seem to have a guest." A light dissipated. As soon as the figure of the Goddess of Agriculture left, the incarnation of the Lady of Misfortune appeared. She smiled and looked at Soren, then said, "I have come to get the reward that belongs to me." "What do you want?" Soren's expression was calm. The Lady of Misfortune took a step forward and whispered, "The domain of fate. This power is not suitable for you." As expected, Soren did not hesitate for long. He looked at the Lady of Misfortune in front of him, then reached out and touched his forehead. A golden light appeared. This light of divinity seemed to have infinite mysteries. He then passed it to the Lady of Misfortune in front of him. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Since the Lady of Misfortune had placed a bet on him, she naturally wanted the corresponding reward. Since I cannot be accompanied by luck, I will bring misfortune to my enemies. Looking at the light of divinity in front of her, the Lady of Misfortune suddenly showed a relaxed smile. She quickly took the golden divinity in front of her and then merged it into her forehead. In an instant, her expression was extremely satisfied. I should leave. Perhaps because she got what she wanted, the Lady of Misfortune was very happy. She went forward and kissed Soren's cheek, then said, "We will meet again soon. The one who is not blessed by fate. May your enemies be shrouded in misfortune forever." Chapter 1088. Soren did not absorb the fate domain. Therefore, when he gave this domain to the Lady of Misfortune, Soren only lost 25 divinity points, and did not lose the more important divinity points. If a god wanted to give a merged domain and domain, then he would lose not only divinity but also divinity. The several subordinate gods cultivated by the god of light all shared the divinity from themselves. Therefore, under normal circumstances, very few gods would use this method to cultivate their subordinate gods. The Storm Lord cultivated the god of Lich in this way, trying to create a divine servant that could be oppressed, but later the betrayal of the god of Lich told the gods that this method would not work. For Soren, losing a little in exchange for more support from the Lady of Misfortune was worth it. Although she was not as loved as the goddess of luck, Soren was still an evil god after all. As long as there was a common interest, it was enough. I should go back. The figure of Princess Royal appeared outside the temple. Although Soren gained the most power in this battle, after all, he killed 3 gods in one breath. Even if Sirik was a lesser divine, his divinity was close to a great divine. Clemvox and Naruto were once great divine powers, so even if Soren gained most of it, the others also gained a lot of benefits this time. Princess Royal's breath was obviously on the verge of a breakthrough. The Avatar Crisis was the easiest time for gods to improve because killing the target during this period was like the Abyss Blood War, they could gain most of the enemy's power. If it was during other times, they would need to slowly consume and absorb divine power. Part of the power of the 3 gods killed by Soren was swallowed by Princess Royal. At present, she was close to the edge of a great divine power. The goddess of ice was originally a great divine power, and now a little opportunity was enough for Princess Royal to reach the great divine power. According to Soren's calculation, the divinity points should be enough. The only thing Princess Royal lacked was 1 divinity point. Arendelle needed someone to guard it. Soren walked up to Princess Royal and bowed his head slightly to express his gratitude. Then he said, "If you need anything in the future, just let me know." Princess Royal looked at him calmly and said after a while, "I feel that the energy storm that triggered the Avatar Crisis is weakening. I am afraid that the time for us to return to the kingdom of God is coming." If he had time, he could go to Arendelle to accompany Anna. Gloria will follow you to the kingdom of the gods, but Anna still needs to stay in the mortal world. If it's possible, give her a child so that she can have someone to rely on. Hearing the elder princess's words, Sauron's face suddenly showed a trace of guilt. Then, he nodded. "I will. Yes." Princess Royal gently lifted the long hair hanging down by her ear and glanced at him. She disappeared in front of his eyes along with the sparkling snowflakes. If the gods returned to the kingdom of God, even if they could come back, it would only be as an avatar. If Soren wanted to give Anna a real son of God, then he must do it within this period of time. Brother. Lillian and Vivian did not appear until Princess Royal left. The 2 little girls had grown up a lot, and their minds could be regarded as adults. Soren smiled and hugged them. Then he put his forehead against theirs and said with a smile, "It seems that you are close to becoming a great divine power. That's good. But you haven't fully integrated with this power, so you'd better rest for a while. At the same time, I have a very important thing for you to do." Lillian and Vivian were eager to try and asked in a crisp voice, "What's the matter?" Soren looked at them seriously and said, "Move the kingdom of God. This may be very difficult for a new god. But you have to try to solve this problem by yourself. I need you to move the kingdom of God to a position close to the underworld. It's best to be close to the main stream of the river Styx. Now that he had taken the position of god of death, everything should start to be arranged in the future. The situation in the abyss was still unclear. Vivian and Lillian had better move the kingdom of God to a place close to the underworld, so that they could help Soren's kingdom watch. Leave it to us. The two little girls seemed very confident. The growth of gods was very fast. They had made great progress during this period of time. From the beginning, it was difficult for them to respond to prayers. Now, they were in charge of their own churches. The twins of fear were growing at an amazing speed. Night fell. In the tower of Motor City, Soren held Gloria in his arms and looked up at the sky. He didn't know when it started, but the stars in the sky had become a little brighter. This was something that was difficult for mortals to observe, but the gods could feel that the Avatar crisis was gradually leaving. A new year had passed. Although Soren had changed a lot of history, the duration of the Avatar crisis had not changed at all. This year, the crisis would end completely. It would take nearly 3 years. The energy storm from the depths of the Sea of Chaos finally began to subside. Soren held Gloria in his arms and stroked her smooth skin with his fingers, as if in deep thought. Suddenly, he said, "Are you afraid of death?" Gloria raised her head in confusion, then kissed Soren and said, "As long as you are by my side, I am not afraid of death." "And aren't you the Lord of Death?" "My love. To be with death is to be with you." Soren held Gloria tightly in his arms and then said in a deep voice, "Have you ever thought about taking over the priesthood of magic?" Hearing Soren's words, Gloria couldn't help but tremble. After a long time, she whispered, "If I can, I naturally hope to stand at the same height as you." Soren continued in a low voice, "Almost all the previous goddesses of magic could not escape death, especially when the Avatar crisis broke out. This is a very bad phenomenon, and it is even regarded by the gods as the fate of the goddess of magic. I have a way to try to get you the priesthood of magic, but mastering this priesthood also means that you have to bear the karma of the magic net." Gloria raised her head and kissed Soren's lips, then whispered, "That may be thousands of years later, isn't it? And this may not be fate's arrangement. Don't I still have you standing behind me?" Soren let out a sigh and murmured, "I am very hesitant. The karma that the goddess of magic herself bears is too heavy. This kind of karma, as long as it backfires, is very terrible." Gloria did not speak. She just hugged Soren tightly and whispered, "Your choice is my choice." Chapter 1089. A new day had arrived. The city of Motor was still peaceful and prosperous. It seemed that it was not affected by the War of the Gods. But the changes in the dark were very obvious. The undead had completely lost their power. Many dead mortals were no longer resurrected as undead, and only some corners of the material plane still had undead. The gods acted quickly. After the final king of the dead appeared, they quickly began to send believers of the church to recover the lost land and purify the land polluted by the undead. Soren had a lot of things to do. The most important thing at the moment was to integrate the power of death. The murder from Sirik, the death from Naruto, and the death from Klemvox. Soren chose the most essential path, which was to integrate all these priesthoods into one and become the true priesthood of death. In other words, he was ready to become the only god of death in the human pantheon. In the entire human pantheon, except for the Lady of Night who had a small part of the murder priesthood, all the other death priesthoods had been integrated by Soren. He was the god of death in the human pantheon. And he was also the most powerful god of death in all the races. The gods of death in other races were at most at the level of a lesser god. Since the ancient god of death, Jurgil, divided his power into 3 parts and gave it to 3 mortals, the god of death in the human pantheon had always been the most powerful. Now Soren had gathered this power. Although part of the priesthoods were in the hands of Vivian and Lillian, Jurgil did not only control death. During the Nesser period, Jurgil had the following priesthoods: Death, the Dead, the Order of Death, Funeral and Tomb, undead state, undead, waste, aging, exhaustion, tyranny, and dusk. At that time, Jurgal was honored as the Lord of all ends, the King of Bones, the God of Death, the Guardian of Death, the Guardian of the Graveyard, the Keeper of Death, the Indifferent, the King of Walking Corpses, and the Nag-Ash. The plane he once controlled was the Grey Wilderness, the Triple Depression, the Skeleton Fortress of Anios. His former allies were Amonata, the ancient sun god, the previous incarnation of Roshanda, Shar, the Lady of the Night, and Taika, the former goddess of fate. The followers of Jesus were lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, and neutral evil. Jurgal's faction was lawful evil. From these ancient records, it could be seen that Jurgal was a very powerful god of death. This was because he was an ally of both good and evil gods. As long as his followers were not in the realm of chaos, they could follow him regardless of whether they were good or evil. This was the real Grim Reaper. Many ancient gods were beyond the scope of camps. The sun god also had believers from good to evil, but there was no chaotic camp. Perhaps some people would think that the birth of the first demons represented the war between the Order gods and the first generation of demons. That was right. These gods were the ancient gods of Order who had fought against the first generation of demons. Their essence was different from the current gods, but their strength was undoubtedly more powerful. The gods were changing. The ancient sun god, Roshanda's previous incarnation, used to control law and time. He was respected as the guardian of law and the guardian of time. The era of the ancient gods had come to an end. Father Oak fell for redemption, Mother Earth went into seclusion, and Jurgal gave up his position of death due to boredom. There were not many ancient gods who were still active today. Roshanda also started a new life by reincarnating. There was no doubt that this was the era of the new gods. The new gods had a close relationship with the mortals. Unless it was the Avatar crisis, the rise and fall of the gods had a lot to do with the mortals. Death as one. Part of Jurgal's clergy was in the hands of Vivian and Lillian, but the clergy of death was all taken by Soren. He was the only Grim Reaper in the human pantheon. He was also the current King of the Dead, the ruler of the underworld, the ruler of the undead, and the Lord of the end of all things. Soren had a lot to do, but there were very few things he could do. This was because he needed to integrate the power of death and regain the rule of the underworld. Most importantly, he needed to maintain the eternal sleep domain. This was a huge burden. Soren could not leave the city of Moder for too long while maintaining the eternal sleep domain. That was to say, before he completely mastered the clergy of death, he could only rely on his avatar to do things. In this case, he could not set up too many enemies. Because now was also the time when Soren was at his weakest. Any enemy that was too powerful would bring huge losses to Soren. The Underworld. In the deepest part of the sea of the underworld, a woman with a beautiful and graceful figure appeared. Her clothes could only slightly cover up her slightly shiny black jade-like skin. Her whole person was full of indescribable charm. This beautiful woman, who was 7 feet tall, walked through the fog with a charming roundabout dance. She easily avoided the well-known traps near the river Styx, and soon she came to an ancient palace. This was a palace that had been through a long time. It was only the size of an ordinary temple, and there were almost no gorgeous decorations. There were only countless simple words on the solid walls, which recorded many things from the beginning of the multiverse to the present. This was the Temple of Jurgal. It was almost extinct in the material plane. Its only function was to record death and the end. It was also the only duty that Jurgal fulfilled at present, Death Recorder. Some ancient and powerful undead guardians were here. Many of them acted as scrolls to record history. These powerful and ancient existences hardly participated in any battles. Their mission was to record death, and their final duty was to record the destruction of the multiverse. Because Jurgal firmly believed that the multiverse would usher in the end of death from the beginning. Although this process would be extremely long, this was his mission. Jurgal's mission was to record the final destruction of the multiverse. This may take hundreds of millions of years, billions of years, or even tens of billions of years. If there was no accident, then the natural destruction of the multiverse would take an extremely long time. Our agreement is complete. The Lady of Night looked at the temple in front of her with interest, then said to the ancient god of death in front of the desk, "The new king of the dead has been born. I have also taken my share of the reward. I have to say, that's a really cautious little guy. You have a good eye this time. It seems that he can sit in this position for much longer than the previous ones." Jurgil looked up with an expressionless face and said, "I know." Jurgil did not care about the process of things. He only cared about the results. The results now looked good. Naruto was dead, Sirik had fallen, and although it was a pity for Clemvox, the new king of the dead had been born. This ancient god of death was only loyal to the position of king of the dead. Therefore, if the incumbent could not perform his duty properly, he would secretly overthrow him. Jurgil barely maintained a cooperative relationship with the previous death god, Mirko. Jurgil had a relatively harmonious relationship with the previous death god, Kalemver. Sirik, on the other hand, was treated with disdain. But even so, when Clemvox could not perform his duty properly, he still gave up his support to Clemvox. This was a ruthless ancient god of death. The Lady of Night was very curious about the temple, but she also knew that even if he gave up his position of god of death, Jurgil was still a terrible enemy. She wisely completed the agreement and left. Even if there were many secrets that she was very curious about, the Lady of Night wisely chose not to explore. As the Lady of Night left, Jurgil turned his attention back to the parchment in his hand. As the oldest god of death, he had lost all his hobbies and feelings for everything in the world. He was also tired of the authority of the gods. 1 year and 1,000 years to him made no difference. Everything was just a written record to him. He only had one mission: to maintain the order of death until the end of the multiverse. P.S. Readers who have monthly tickets can vote. Moi. Chapter 1090. The Underworld. This plane used to be called the Hazy Realm. When mortals died, their souls would be pulled into the Hazy Realm. Most of the vast space in this plane was flat, dark, boring, and monotonous. There were no obvious topographical features. The Hazy Realm had the following features: 1. Stable. 2. Suppression magic. All magic is suppressed. Casting difficulty increases, casting effect decreases. The underworld existed in a special space in the multiverse. When mortals died, their souls would naturally go from the main material plane to the underworld through the river Styx, but it was difficult for them to go by their own will. Servants of God could come here from the realm, divine kingdom, of the god and bring the soul of the god they served back to the divine kingdom. Due to the agreement between the devils and Clemvox, the 9 hells had portals that led to the underworld, and the demon lords would sometimes create portals from the bottomless abyss to come here. In these 2 cases, demons could use these portals to bring souls back to the plane they lived in. The astral plane could not go directly to the underworld, and had to go through the river Styx to reach it. Most of the inhabitants of the underworld were souls of the dead, waiting to be sent to the plane of the god they believed in. These souls were petitioners who lacked the characteristics of the realm. They had no immunity, resistance, or special properties. The souls of the faithless formed a living wall outside the Judgment City, the wall of the faithless, and the false believers were punished to work in the city. They were sometimes tortured by the demons. This was a rather ordinary plane, and the only feature was the Crystal Tower. Clemvox and Jurgil's crystal realm stood in the middle of the Judgment City. It was a gloomy, dull, and crowded with the condemned. The Crystal Tower was a shining tower made of transparent stone. When Sirik was still the god of death, this tower was called the Skeletal Castle, but Clemvox changed it into a symbol of his promise to publicly and equally judge the dead. The underworld itself was not big. But it was the source of the river Styx, and also the transit point for countless souls. Whether good or evil gods, they had to transfer the souls of their believers to the divine kingdom from here. This was an ancient agreement between the god of death and other gods. To some extent, the god of death had to maintain a neutral attitude, because even the devils had a corresponding agreement with the god of death. Such was the view of good and evil in the multiverse. There were many mortals who should head to the B'ator Inferno and the bottomless abyss after death. But whether it was the gods or the Grim Reaper, there was an existence that they could not tolerate, and that was the Soul Stealer. They were a bunch of lunatics who challenged order. These people had almost no principles to speak of. Be it good souls or evil souls, they were all wealth to them. They stole these souls and sold them to other planes, completely ignoring the good and evil of the multiverse. Due to the existence of the Soul Stealers, even the kind-hearted Saint Samurai could fall into the abyss of hell after death. If the order collapsed, the rules would cease to exist. In exchange for the devil's help, Naruto sold these souls. It could be imagined that for a long time in the future, the gods would need the servants of God from another world to retrieve the souls that had been taken away by the demons. This was because they would always have believers that needed to be redeemed and not forgotten somewhere in the lower planes. This was the duty of the gods. When Soren's incarnation reached the underworld, it was already a ruin full of holes. The only thing that was still intact was the Crystal Tower, because even Asmodeus would not easily challenge Jurgle. Countless souls had been taken away by the demons, and Naruto used these souls as bargaining chips in exchange for the support of the demons. When Naruto died, most of the servants of death that served him had already fallen. These were all one with the gods. The entire underworld seemed empty, with only a few ownerless souls floating around. This time, the Death Pantheon was almost completely rebuilt. The underworld had undergone a huge reshuffle, and the demons were the biggest winners. The City of Judgment was almost empty, but there were still countless souls floating in the river Styx. The Grim Reaper's duty was to maintain order. As the King of the Dead, Soren did not need to judge all the souls. Only some of the more important souls were worth handing over. So, after coming to this plane, the first thing that he needed to do was to create the servants of death. This was another form of angel. Mortals called them angels of death, but Soren was more used to calling them servants of death. They were the assistants of the King of the Dead, responsible for judgment, transportation, and delivery of souls. Some of the powerful dead that were reluctant to leave the mortal world were also brought back by these servants of death. Summon the kingdom of God. A light gate opened in the center of the underworld. As Soren obtained the title of King of the Dead, the petitioners could also reach this plane. In the golden light, some shadow angels flew up from around the great temple. They came through the light gate and knelt down on one knee in front of Soren's incarnation. There were a total of 12 shadow angels. 9 of them were men, and 3 were women. Soren drew a little divine light from his forehead, and then gave this divinity to the power of death, and then injected it into the bodies of these shadow angels. A total of 36 divinity points. With Soren's divinity, the shadow angels in front of him changed rapidly. They changed their shape and turned into the appearance of the servants of death. Their weapon also became a death scythe that harvested souls. These angels were promoted to otherworld servants, and they would help Soren restore the operation of the underworld. I am the King of the Dead, the Lord of the end of all things. Soren's majestic voice echoed in the underworld. He pointed his finger to the wisest of the otherworld servants and said in a deep voice, I give thee the domain of truth. Thou shalt judge the sins of mortals on my behalf. Words were law. The invisible divine power formed the power of the law. An eye made of white light was integrated into the body of the servant in front of him, and then the first, angel of judgment, was born. I give thee the domain of slaughter. Thou shalt harvest the souls of traitors on my behalf. A little blood light appeared. Soren drew a little more divinity from his forehead and injected it into the strongest of the otherworld servants. It was a female angel, and she quickly turned into the form of a slaughter angel. I give thee the domain of tracking. Thou shalt guide Styx's soul on my behalf. A little bit of divinity fell. Soren selected the most agile of them and gave them the domain of tracking, and they were responsible for guiding Styx's soul. 3 rays of light rose. After Soren selected the most outstanding of them, the 3 chosen Otherworld servants were promoted to Otherworld Oracles. They would be the leaders of the Servants of Death, and they would help Soren re-establish the order of the Underworld. P.S. Begging for a monthly vote. Chapter 1091. The entire Underworld was in ruins. After the demons' raid, the entire place was in ruins. Soren had to start everything from scratch. Fortunately, even though he had just taken over the role of a god, the memories of his past life had given him some understanding of death. Even without Jurgel's guidance, Soren could quickly build the system of the Underworld. As for what the previous system was, it didn't matter. Soren already had his own ideas to complete the structure of the Underworld. After Soren's arrival, the initial framework was quickly completed. The 3 foreign gods summoned the heroic spirits from the Kingdom of Shadows and turned them into the Servants of Death. They were the guardians of the order of the Underworld and had a trace of the power of death. Their strength was roughly equivalent to that of a legendary demon. They were responsible for maintaining the daily operations of the River Styx and the City of Judgment. Soren's advantage was that he already had the foundation of the Kingdom of Shadows. The foundation that he had accumulated in the past finally came in handy today. He quickly completed the 3 most important parts of the Underworld, receiving the souls, eliminating the rebellion, and judging the sins. The Killing Angel was the most powerful of the 3. She turned groups of heroic spirits into the Servants of Death. Then, Soren gave them a trace of divine power and they began to eliminate the wandering souls, demons, and demons that might still exist in the Underworld. These Servants of Death were transformed from the brave and powerful heroic spirits. They had the power to harvest lives. They were even strengthened in the Underworld and were able to fight against high-level legendary enemies. In the darkness, many eyes were watching everything that happened in the Underworld. Many gods were waiting to see how Soren would restore the Underworld. However, Soren did better than they expected. Even Jurgel himself was surprised. In the past, all the gods of death needed his help to manage the Underworld. However, Soren didn't seem to need this at all. He alone completed the reconstruction of the Underworld. Groups of heroic spirits passed through the portal. The Servants of Death had a special power. This power was given by the River Styx. They were not afraid of the water of the Underworld and had the special ability to take lives. This transformation was continuously carried out. It only needed a little divine power from Soren's incarnation to guide it. Soon, there were thousands of years of servants of the God of Death. However, they obeyed orders like an army. A portion of them began to clean up the City of Judgment, and at the same time, they patrolled like an army. The other group advanced along the main stream of the Nether River. After wiping out some wandering devils along the way, they encountered a small group of powerful soul stealers. These soul stealers had tried to provoke the Death God servants, but the price they had to pay was death. The power of the Underworld was extremely strong. After Soren had converted nearly 5,000 servants of the God of Death, he finally felt that the divine power he had accumulated in the Underworld was almost depleted. The Death Divine System's foundation was simply too astonishing. Soren could not help but look at the high walls of the Judgment City when he saw that there were still some heroic spirits that had yet to be converted. Wall of the Faithless. He thought about it and gave up this bold idea. This wall was built by the gods. Although it was not used as often as in the past, extracting its power would destroy it. This was something that many gods opposed. Deep in the Netherworld Sea, Jurgel had been observing all this for a long time before he muttered to himself, "It seems that this one doesn't need my help." After saying that, he picked up the ancient scroll again. The army of the servants of the God of Death advanced quickly. They fought all the way from the main stream of the Nether River to the Sea of the Underworld, and then followed the main stream to clean up the enemies in the tributaries, killing the soul stealers who could not escape in time. After that, the Angel of Judgment led a group of servants of the God of Death and began to lead the souls to the Judgment City. Soren had the power of lie and deceit. At the same time, he was the King of the Dead. All the sins committed by people had nowhere to hide in front of him. The angel of judgment was endowed with the power of truth. His existence was like a judge, deciding where most of the souls would go. There was a unique space inside the judgment city. There was a huge portal where many souls would wait. Some would go to the kingdom of God, and some would go to the abyss of hell. Most of the souls of the believers would enter the Nether River after a simple trial. They would flow along the Nether River to the depths of the Source Sea, where the souls were born and where they belonged. There was no reincarnation in this world. The duties of the death divine system did not include arranging the reincarnation of souls. They were only responsible for sending the souls to where they should go. There was a past life in this world, but there was not necessarily an afterlife. When the souls reached the Source Sea, they would be merged, and then a new soul would gradually be born. If the mortals wanted to live longer after death, they would either go to the kingdom of God or be reincarnated in other planes. But these were not easy. More mortals' fates were to flow along the Nether River to the depths of the Source Sea after death. It was like the birth of the first soul in the multiverse. The water of the Nether River would wash away all memories. In just one day, the underworld was restored to order under Soren's management. The servants of the god of death began to lead the souls, and the believers who should belong to the kingdom of God were also waiting for the servants of God to lead them. The entire judgment city was shrouded in a solemn atmosphere. Although the number of souls piled up was not many, some order had been restored. The underworld was not a kingdom of God. It was a special plane, and the kingdom of the death divine system was based on the underworld. Soren did not have the idea of transforming the kingdom of God because the underworld itself was an extension of his kingdom of God. His believers could go back and forth from the underworld. For all the gods, the god of death was a very heavy job. Some gods of death would even slack off, or even do things according to their own wishes. But Soren would not do that. He just reshaped the underworld according to his own order, and then used a set of more efficient methods to manage it. At present, he had only completed the basic framework, but in the future, he would have enough time to complete all of it. The devils have plundered a lot of souls. Soren stood at the top of the crystal tower and looked down at the underworld. Everything here was on the right track, at least the Nether River had been restored. He looked at the countless souls under his feet and murmured, Asmodeus has got the resources he wants. Then the last wave of the Avatar crisis is coming. The gods acted quickly. When the underworld was restored to order, the servants of God began to lead the souls to the kingdom of God. These would be handed over by the 12 angels of death promoted by Soren, and he himself would not stay in the underworld for the time being. The Avatar crisis was not over yet. The underworld had been greatly damaged, and there were still many things he needed to do. Chapter 1092. The devils were very smart. As soon as the battle with the Death Lord came to an end, they quickly retreated after raiding the underworld for the last time. The remaining devils were actually the ones who didn't get enough benefits before but still wanted to see if there was a chance. These people were all strangled by Sauron's servants of death, and almost all of them were killed. The underworld was a special area in the lower planes. The approximate level was the material plane, the shadow plane, the spirit world, the underworld, the grey wilderness, the Shuraba, the Bator Inferno, and the bottomless abyss. As for the bottom of the abyss, it was the Sea of Chaos. The main stream of the river Styx was quickly taken back by Soren's servants of death. However, the river Styx ran through the multiverse, and there were still many places that needed to be patrolled by the death god system. And in the afternoon of the same day, Soren's territory welcomed a group of special visitors. These people were the devils of the lower planes. The death god system had always been in a relatively neutral state. Soren's visitors were a group of Yugros from the scorching inferno. This was a race of devils. They were specifically divided into Canoros, Mazeros, Maleros, Nicaros, Honoros, high-grade Eros, and Commander Nicaros. The leader of this group of visitors was Commander Nicaros. A Yugoloth of this level was basically equivalent to a demon overlord, and they often controlled a large area of territory. The devil sent a messenger and brought rich gifts, including various rare metals, high-grade soul crystals, materials from the astral plane, and destructive materials from the edge of the plane. The Great Death Lord. Commander Nikaros respectfully knelt down in front of Soren to express his respect. Then he said, "I am Commander Nikaros, Kenoros. I represent the other Yugros to visit the Great Death Lord. At the same time, we hope to continue to serve you. According to the oldest contract, it could be traced back to when the underworld was just growing. The Yugros were the helpers of the death god system. Their range of activity was limited to the lower planes. These demons had another title, Ferrymen of the Styx. They traveled back and forth between the bottomless abyss, the Baator Inferno, the Grey Wilderness, the Scorching Inferno, and so on. They relied on the river Styx for trade, and at the same time, they undertook the business of helping other creatures cross the river Styx for a fee. As the greediest and most selfish creatures in the outer planes, the Yugalos had an absolute ruling position in the Scorching Inferno. Yugros usually served as mercenaries for demons, devils, or powerful beings from other planes. Among them, the most special one was the Du-En-Mo, also known as the Ferryman of the Nether River. This was a special advanced profession. Often, a ferryman of the Nether River who had worked for a long time would eventually become a half-undead. To the inner circle of the Yugros, the Styx River ferryman was a very important plane. It allowed them to travel to the lower planes easily, and at the same time, find ways to obtain more benefits. Soren had become the Lord of Death. Correspondingly, the new ferryman of the Styx River also needed to be recognized by him. On the throne above the palace, Soren looked down at the Yugros in front of him. Although they were a group of demons, they could be used as long as they had value. Although the Yugros were only ferrymen of the river Styx, they also assisted the death god's servants to protect the interests of the river Styx. They were like mercenaries, and when necessary, they would listen to the arrangements of the death god. Of course, the premise was that there were benefits to be gained. Soren's contemplation made the Yugros feel a little uneasy. But then Soren's voice sounded, and he slowly said, "Everything will still be carried out according to the ancient contract. However, the waters that you can move in need to be redivided, and some of the tributaries of the river Styx have been stolen by demons and devils. If you want to continue in your current position, then you have to prove your value." There were not enough death god servants. He could not manage the rivers outside the underworld, but since these Yugros wanted benefits, then they had to pay something. Let them deal with the demons and devils first. Hearing Soren's words, the Yugros commander hesitated, but then nodded and said, "Okay. The army of the Scorched Inferno will soon help you regain control of these rivers." Although the Scorched Inferno was not as good as the Baator Inferno, it was still a battle between the underworld and the underworld. However, it was a combat system of the lower planes after all, and the Yugalos were the most numerous and powerful among them. The ferrymen of the Nether River represented the freedom of travel and trade in the lower planes, and they were willing to pay some price for it. Very good. Soren nodded, then looked at the Yugros behind him and said in a deep voice, "Are they the ferrymen of the river Styx that you have chosen?" The Yugros commander respectfully said, "Yes." The Great Lord of Death. Dekinmo was a special kind of demon. To a certain extent, their demonic form had been changed. The water of the river Styx was dangerous even for gods. Directly touching it would hurt the soul, and only the death god's servants could easily remove it. But even the death god's servants could not touch too much of it. Perhaps only Soren could swim a few times in the river Styx. The demons could not resist the corrosion of the river Styx. This corrosion was targeted at life, but the most special kind of demons, the Dekinmo, could touch the river Styx. Although they could not touch it for too long, it was still much better than other creatures. All the ferrymen of the river Styx had a number. The Dekinmo would only be responsible for their own area and would not easily step into the territory of others. So if some realms could not be reached directly, the creatures of the underworld might have to deal with 2 ferrymen of the river Styx. Any Dekinmo was Soren's servant. They were directly responsible to Soren, but according to the contract, the death god rarely mobilized them because their task was on the river Styx. "Let them come up." Soren waved his hand, and then many Yugalos stood in front of the hall in panic. Soren looked down at these demons, and then a little divine light appeared and turned into countless light spots that fell on these demons. Their life forms quickly changed. The characteristics of the Yugalos gradually faded, and a new aura of death appeared on them. This gave them the ability to fear aura, and at the same time, they could cast transformation spells at will, gain the ability to control corpses, and use precise teleportation spells. Rows of Yugalos knelt in front of Soren. From today onwards, they were the new ferrymen of the river Styx. The river that was directly connected to the river Styx did not need Yugalos, and this area was under the responsibility of the death god servants. The range of activity of the Yugalos included the Grey Waste, the Scorched Hell, the Azura Field, the Bator Inferno, and the Bottomless Abyss. Under normal circumstances, Yugalos rarely set foot in places outside of these areas. They had been the vassals of the death god's servants since the river Styx became stronger. Chapter 1093. The underworld was back to normal. However, it would take some time for it to recover to its peak because it needed more than one god to rebuild the death pantheon. Soren also needed to cultivate some weak gods in the future. However, after walking around the underworld, he also had some ideas in his mind. After his avatar returned to Moder, Soren immediately began to act. He soon found Lululu. After such a long time, the little cat girl had grown up a lot. When Soren arrived, she was practicing her new ability. Because of the divinity, Lord Soren. When she saw Soren's figure, Lulu immediately stopped and said respectfully, "Are you looking for me?" "Yes." Soren nodded, then looked at Lulu up and down in front of him. Although she was young, she was trained by him. There was no doubt about her loyalty. She was much better than those unreliable goddesses. Thinking of this, Soren couldn't help but smile and said, "Are you willing to serve me?" It was as if he was worried that she didn't quite understand. Soren looked at Lulu's puzzled face and said, "Although you have the power of divinity, you don't have a real divinity. If you are willing to serve me, I can bestow upon you a priesthood." Divinity? Lulu had a confused expression on her face. She knew how to fight, how to catch fish, and how to have fun, but she didn't understand what Soren said at all. War creatures were very talented in fighting. However, Lulu was more ignorant. Gloria had tried to teach her some advanced knowledge, but she was very active and couldn't calm down to learn. Therefore, Lulu's knowledge was estimated to be able to recognize all the words. After all, she was just a mortal and didn't understand a lot of knowledge. It often took hundreds of years for a new god to grow, and Vivian and Lillian were geniuses among geniuses. "I am willing to serve Lord Soren." Although she didn't understand what he meant, it didn't prevent Lulu from nodding in agreement. The little cat girl bowed like a knight, then looked up and blinked, "Is this okay?" Soren couldn't help but smile. Then he smiled, shook his head, and whispered, "It should be okay. You have the divine power from the goddess of cats and dance." This goddess was originally a member of the gods, and she was related to death for some reason. "I'll try to give you a clergy first. If you can get it, I can try to give you a new clergy in the future. Priesthood could be bestowed." And as the Lord of Death, Soren didn't need to give Lululu's divinity, he could create some divinities. Because he was the master of death. In other words, Soren's death clergy itself contained countless clergy extensions. "Follow me to the temple." Soren turned and left, and Lulu followed him. Soon, the two came to the inner part of the temple, and Soren's figure appeared in golden light. He looked down at Lulu like a great ruler, and then pressed his hand on her forehead. "In the name of the Lord of Death, Soren." Sauron's voice carried some kind of powerful power of law. When the name of the true god sounded, countless golden lights appeared, and then he said in a deep voice, "I grant thee the position of Guide of the Underworld, and Guide of the Underworld." I give thee the domain of tracking. I give thee the power to dispel the undead. The invisible power of law formed a mysterious seal, and in an instant, the remaining divinity from the goddess of cats and dance was activated, and then the divinity of divinity was integrated into it. The Underworld Guide. Under Soren's power, Lulu's divine presence quickly appeared. Then, when a new divinity was born, the presence of a weak divine power appeared, and Lulu quickly became a true god. Underworld Guide, Weak Divine Power. Soren gave Lulu the domain of tracking, and at the same time gave her the power to dispel the undead. Her divinity was the Underworld Guide, and she was responsible for the location of the underworld, and at the same time, guiding souls to the Judgment City. A weak divinity was quickly born. After becoming a true god, Lulu's intelligence improved a lot, and she immediately understood her duty, and then knelt down in front of Soren. She was Soren's subordinate god. As a weak divinity, in addition to the divinity given by Soren, she also had the divinity of cat and dance. These divinities came from the cat goddess and the dance goddess. Because of the compatibility, she didn't get the divinities of hedonism, large-scale joyous celebrations, and sensual pleasure. Although these divinities were weak and limited, it was enough for Lulu to become a god. A divine mark appeared. It then disappeared into Lulu's body. This was Soren's mark, and from today onwards, she could freely enter and exit the underworld, and she could also build her divine kingdom in the underworld. After everything was done, Soren also learned about Lulu's divinity, domain, and abilities: cat goddess, Lulu, underworld guide, level, weak divine power. Other names: guide of the underworld, cat maiden. Holy emblem, non-living domain, underworld alignment, chaotic neutral. Lulu is actually from the chaotic faction. Soren was shocked. Divinity, underworld guide, cat, dance believers, nun-priest alignment, lawful neutral, lawful evil, chaotic neutral, chaotic good, neutral good domain, chaotic, seduction, tracking, trickery. Favorite weapon, giant cat claw. Lulu was actually from the chaotic faction? Soren's mouth twitched, but he wasn't surprised, because this cat girl did have the potential to be from the chaotic faction. However, to Soren's surprise, Lulu Mayao actually had the domain of charm and crafty. This was really an unexpected surprise. It seemed that she would not be too weak in battle after being officially apotheosized. At least, she was much stronger than other weak divine powers. Cats had a natural increase in combat strength. Lulu actually inherited the trickery domain from the cat goddess and the dance goddess, which made Soren feel a lot more at ease. Why didn't the Lady of Night succeed in capturing the cat goddess and the dance goddess? It was simple. Trickery domain. This domain often had many special abilities, and many times it would have unexpected effects, and the trickery domain itself would give extra casting bonuses. Chapter 1094. Lulu's ascension to godhood wasn't necessarily a big deal. However, she was still a true god that Soren personally gave her, so a celebration was held in Mordor City that day, and everyone who was busy gathered together to celebrate. The little cat girl was still a little silly. She didn't know how to be a god. Fortunately, she was Vivian's maid. With the two little girls teaching her, she should be able to adapt quickly. For a god with weak divine power, the number of followers was not the most important thing. As long as she could complete the mission given to her by Soren, she would be able to obtain some faith from Soren's shrine. Now, Soren's giant god temple was being expanded. This was a huge expenditure of wealth. It was estimated that the entire giant god temple would need about 30 million Kindler coins to complete. It would take about 1/5 of Motor City. The city hall would not be able to fork out this amount of money. Fortunately, Soren had a lot of money to begin with, and he also had wealth from other realms. Based on the preliminary calculation, the giant god temple would only be completed at the end of the Avatar crisis. Even with the help of wizards and priests, as well as the mobilization of a large number of golems, the initial completion of the giant god temple would still take about half a year. The layout of the entire Holy Temple district was reorganized. The completed temple area included Soren's giant temple, Vivian's and Lillian's great temples, Lulu's and Saruman's core temples, and the Maiden of Pain's subordinate temples. Furthermore, a portion of the space had to be set aside as backup. At present, the amount of work in Mordor City was huge. First, it was Soren's temple, Vivian's and Lillian's temples, and then the fifth phase of Mordor City's transformation project, as well as large-scale farmland reclamation. After gaining the friendship of the goddess of agriculture, Mordor City's expansion speed increased again. However, this time it was mainly an expansion in agriculture. The growth of the population could never be separated from food. In the future, Soren planned to build Mordor into a giant city with a population of more than 1 million, so part of the farmland must be reclaimed in advance. Even with the help of magic, the initial cultivation of the land would only yield some gains. If they wanted a real harvest, they would have to turn it into a mature land. Mordor City, Grand Library. Dinawara was wearing a standard witch robe and a pointed hat. She walked out with a large book in her arms. She was a mature woman in her 30s, with a beautiful face and a voluptuous body. As an intermediate grade witch who had advanced at such a young age, Dinawara had spent most of her time and energy on the research of arcane magic. As a result, her physique was rather delicate. But it didn't matter, because the witches had enough means to help her complete some physical work. There was a small clay golem waiting outside the door of the library. It quickly came over and took the book in her hand, and at the same time, it carried some materials on its back. Dinawara clapped her hands and said softly, "Raffle. All right. We can go back now." The clay golem said in a dull voice, "Yes, Master." The assistant golems of the witches all possessed a certain level of intelligence, roughly equivalent to that of a 12-year-old human. This was the clay golem that Dinawara exchanged with her own contribution points. Compared with ordinary citizens, they had certain privileges and could exchange for many things that ordinary people could not touch at all. She cherished this clay golem very much, not only because it was worth an amazing 300 contribution points, but also because it was her very important assistant. Golems could complete tasks such as cleaning, carrying, fighting, and so on. Some dangerous experiments could also be done by them. Dinawara. At this moment, another young witch ran over with a face full of joy when she saw her. It was a delicate half-elf witch. From her race, it could be judged that she was a new witch because most of the middle-grade and high-grade witches in Mordor City were human, and they came from near the northern tower. Dinawara looked at the other party and smiled. It was one of her friends, Dinawara, a half-elf from Autumn Fall. "Thank you for your notes." The young half-elf witch handed a note to Dinawara and said gratefully, "I was just about to return this note to you. Thank you so much. Without your help, I would never have mastered the stone to mud spell so quickly." Dinawara smiled when she heard the words. She touched the other party's cheek and said, "That's because you worked hard enough. Have you already learned the stone to mud spell? In that case, you should be able to take the reclamation task of the city hall. The contribution points rewarded for this task are much higher than others." The city hall was reclaiming new farmland. Not only farmland, but also the third phase of the greening construction task, which required a large number of witches and droll. The effect of the stone to mud spell was very simple. It turned rocks into soft mud. After all, Mordor City was an island, and the scope of the rock layer was still very large. The tasks issued by the city hall were carried out according to the area. As long as the witches mastered the stone to mud spell, they could take a range of areas as the task. They would turn the land into soft mud in batches, and finally the city hall would receive the reward after receiving it. Next was the droll's job. Because the soil was alkaline and acidic, these needed to be balanced by the droll. The final land would be the initial cultivated land, which needed to be cultivated carefully and slowly turned into fertile land. This method of reclaiming farmland was much faster than the mortals in the past. Just as Lady Gloria had said, the true essence of arcane magic wasn't just for fighting. It could change one's life and ultimately benefit everyone. Yes. The young half-elf witch nodded and said, I've already taken the task of 1 square kilometer. I think I can finish it next month if I'm fast. Witches were usually a bit of a homebody. The two friends had not seen each other for a while and had a lot to talk about, so they went back together. Suddenly, Dina seemed to have thought of something and said softly, That's right. I heard from other people that the City Hall seems to be preparing for the 3 Links project. You can prepare in advance. There should be a lot of good tasks. 3 Links project? The half-elf witch thought for a moment and asked, Is it water supply, electricity supply, and heating? Yes. Dinawara nodded and said, This should be a big move. Not only the city of Mordor, but also the port area and the other 12 towns. It looks like the workload is not small. The half-elf witch said, Is that so? Then it looks like we really need to prepare in advance. There were many witches in the city of Mordor now. The witches had to rely on themselves to obtain resources and knowledge, and the most important of them was to exchange contribution points. Taking the construction task of the city hall was one of the safest and most efficient ways. As for the combat task, the academy witches were probably not good enough. Not everyone could adapt to the bloody battlefield. About 3 or 4 out of 10 witches could become combat witches. Most of the other witches were from the academy. They could fight, but they were not good at it. Basically, there were more people in the academy's wizard organization, while the combat wizard organization had fewer people. The probability of them being eliminated was very high. This was a shameful waste for Soren because those who had the talent to become a wizard could be very useful even if they were not good at fighting. Chapter 1095. The city of Mordor was a huge hole. And Soren had laid down the foundation of everything, which was order and law. Because of its close relationship with the goddess of wealth, the trade in Mordor city now occupied the mainstream of the material plane. Almost all the caravans knew that they could return with a full load after going to Mordor city once. And because of the close alliance with the goddess of agriculture, there were now a large number of droll in Mordor city. Some of them came to assist in the construction work, while the others came to learn. Saruman already had a small droll organization under his command. At the same time, many droll who advocated the balance between humans and nature came to Mordor city to learn from it. According to the layout of the city, they considered how to reduce the damage to the natural environment caused by population reproduction. At least for now, although Mordor city was the most populated city in the material plane, the surrounding natural environment had not been damaged much, and it was not as dirty and messy as other cities. Soren flattened most of the virgin forest, but he also rebuilt a large area of forest parks. Countless trees and flowers were planted and arranged in an artificial way, which not only maintained the balance of the island of Mordor, but also made the environment more beautiful. Only the legendary droll could feel that there was a huge magic circle under these forest parks. They absorbed the power of nature to balance the earth, water, wind, and fire. When necessary, they could also provide energy for the magic lock. The material plane ushered in a short buffer time. But everyone knew that everything was not over, because the devils had obtained a large number of souls from the underworld. As long as they digested these souls, the final battle of the Avatar crisis would come. It took time for souls to transform. It was conceivable that the devils, whose strength had greatly increased, would inevitably attack the material plane. At the same time, in the center of Mordor city, Soren also received new information. Have the Lady of Silvermoon and the Lady of Night started? He put down the information in his hand and murmured, It's almost time. Now that the conflict between the two goddesses has intensified, and they have begun to confront each other head-on, the time should be coming soon. The Queen of Spiders has hunted down 2 gods of the Elven divine system. With her hatred for the Elven divine system, it is absolutely impossible for her to stop, so the war in the Spider Forest should be breaking out soon. There was another piece of information in this report. Recently, the sound of hymns could be faintly heard from the core area of Glory City. A large number of clergymen had gathered near the temple. There were rumors in the outside world that angels had been seen emerging from the glowing portal. angel? Soren rubbed his forehead and muttered to himself, is the god of light ready? The last wave of the Avatar crisis was a battle between Order Evil and Order Good. These were the two most powerful forces in the multiverse. The bottomless abyss had been weakened since the fall of the three giants. Most of the other god systems were not strong enough. Neither the unrestrained wilderness nor the paradise were a threat. The underworld and the Bator Inferno were the strongest forces in the lower planes. But now, the underworld had suffered a great loss. The scorched hell was split into two halves, the undead in the Grey Moor was heavily injured, and the abyss was in chaos. Asmodeus' power had swelled to the point that he was the strongest in the lower planes. With his ambition, he would definitely fight the god of light head-on. For now. Indeed, only the 7 hills of Mountain Paradise could resist the 9 floors of Bator Inferno. It's a pity that the natural god system has declined. The natural god system was supposed to be the strongest, but now the natural god system could not dominate everything at all. The god of light was the only one who could fight in the material plane. Even Soren could not do this. Although the army of Motor City was the best in the material plane, Soren did not think that these mortals could fight against the Blood War Legion. There was almost no chance of winning. There were countless legendary demons among the elites of the Blood War Legion. These mortals would only die if they went up. Unless the gods were willing to summon a large number of oracles from other worlds from their divine kingdoms, there was no chance at all. And among the gods who were willing to sacrifice their divine fate for this battle, only the gods who were in the lawful and good alignment were willing to do so. Wasn't it interesting? Sometimes, these loathsome moralists can be very great. Because when the real disaster came, only they would rush to the front without hesitation, and they would not care about any gains or losses. As a god in the Order Evil alignment, Soren really loved and hated these people. The Lady of Night will never deal with the demons. The Storm Lord is not reliable at all. The Elven god system and the Orc god system can at most protect themselves. The Dwarf god system is not very useful. The Lady of Silver Moon and the Goddess of Magic are probably busy fighting. The God of War may take action, but I'm afraid he won't go all out. This last wave of impact, I'm afraid the material plane can only rely on the God of Light to resist it. Fortunately, he had expected this. The strength of the God of Light has not suffered too much, and many of the Saint Samurai legions are still there. In the last wave of impact of the Avatar crisis, Soren could at most protect himself. If he resisted it, the whole Motor City would be lost. But this did not prevent Soren from doing something behind the scenes. For example, the layout of the bottomless abyss could start. The bottomless abyss, the third layer, the Forgotten Land. It had been some time since he took down Littell. After infecting some lesser demon lords, Sauron finally gained complete control of these planes. The characteristics of the planes had been transformed again. After Sauron destroyed a large number of undead, countless demons were born from the abyss blood pool. Almost every day, thousands of demons were hatched. These demons were collected by Sauron's army, and then the survival of the fittest bred batches of middle-grade and high-grade demons. Today's Galumba arena had been expanded several times. Especially after Soren seized the throne of the Lord of Death, a large number of demons sought refuge in Sauron's hands. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that there was some kind of close relationship between the Baelor Lord Sauron and the Lord of Death. If they did not hurry to seek refuge now, when would they wait? The entire Garuba arena had been transformed into a gigantic military camp. The demon armies of the two planes were gathered by Soren, and suddenly became a very terrible force. And now, this force had chosen its next target. That was, the King of Ghouls, Dor-Isen. After digesting Littell's foundation, Sauron immediately prepared to attack this demon lord. Because after killing him, his demon army could directly attack the headquarters of the King of Gnolls, Yeenagu. It was time to claim the throne of the Demon Prince. Chapter 1096. Inside the huge magma pool. The burly body of the Baelor Lord was immersed in it, and around him was a group of Baelor guards who were in charge of protecting him, as well as the elite succubus maids who served Sauron. The promotion of demons was much easier than mortals. Whether it was demons or devils, because of the existence of special genes in their bodies, most demons and devils could be promoted quickly by their superiors. But those who could get this promotion were often some lucky ones. Only a certain Abyss Lord who had just risen would promote his subordinates on a large scale. A veteran Abyss Lord already had enough subordinates, so he could only rely on himself to promote. The Baelor Lord Sauron promoted a group of subordinates, and as a reward for taking down Letel, he gave his subordinates a large number of soul crystals. Master. Master. A pair of succubus that looked almost identical walked into the palace. They had incomparably coquettish faces and were only wearing tight-fitting black leather clothes and pants, fully displaying the exaggerated and seductive figures unique to succubi. This was a pair of new succubus elites. They had forgotten the memories of their previous lives, but vaguely remembered that they were conjoined twins. So after falling into the bottomless abyss, these two souls were transformed into succubus. They might be a pair of spellcaster twins in their previous lives because these two succubus had the level of a warlock. This required enough talent and a little opportunity from the previous life. According to Sauron's guess, the two should be born in a warlock family. As for falling into the bottomless abyss, it wasn't strange. Many warlock families in the material plane were very chaotic, especially those who wanted to maintain the purity of their bloodline. There were many taboo things that happened. These two succubus were personally transformed by Rhaenys. As the number one succubus serving Sauron, Rhaenys was no longer in charge of a small tavern. She was given a large fief by Sauron. The area was roughly equivalent to a southern dukedom in the material plane. But because it was in the bottomless abyss, it naturally didn't have that many people. Rhaenys built her own fortress in the fief, but as a smart high-grade succubus, she knew that everything she had was given to her by Sauron. So unless it was something that she had to deal with, she would try her best to come to the Galumba arena to serve Sauron. In order to prevent other succubus bitches from taking advantage of her absence to replace her position, Rhaenys was very smart to select a pair of succubus twins and send them to Sauron's side to serve him. In this way, she would have enough sources of information around Sauron, and she could also monitor whether there were other succubi trying to take advantage of the situation to replace her. Currently, Rhaenys wasn't in the Galumba arena. Sauron gave out nearly half of the plane's territory, so a group of promoted secondary demon lords were busy building their own territory and recruiting enough demon army. Because the great Baelor Lord Sauron obviously wouldn't stop here, there was a new war waiting for them. In the huge magma pool, Sauron walked out naked. This place was directly connected to the inside of the volcano. At the same time, it opened a passage to the fire elemental plane. It was very suitable for Balrogs to improve their strength here. As a demon lord who ruled nearly 2 levels, Sauron's strength improved very quickly. Now, his attribute template had become, name, Sauron, High Demon Lord. Race, Demon. Form, Baelor, Grade 7, Large Otherworld Creature, Crossplane, Evil. Level, Creature Level 32. Attributes, Strength 42, Agility 30, Constitution 38, Intelligence 27, Wisdom 30, Charm 32. Alignment, Lawful Evil. Note, other demons will be slightly hostile to your actions. Health, 18121812. Demonic Power, 2750630000. Domain, Slaughter, Death, Rage, Evil, Control, Flame. Skills, Sneak 485, Deception 425, Negotiation 315, Literacy 370, Intimidation 470, Spell Identification 320, Use Magic Device 320, Listen 315, Detect 325, Search 290. Abilities, Aura of Fear, Body of Flames, Whip of Flames, Burning Explosion, Bind, Demonic Claws, +1 Natural Magic Weapon, Demonic Skin, +10 Damage Reduction, Demonic Resistance, +10 All Types of Resistance, Damage Reduction 15, Boss, Night Vision 120 feet, Immunity to Electric, Fire, Poison, acid and cold resistance 10 points, magic resistance 30 points, telepathy 300 feet, truth, constant. Skills, destructive strike, advanced dual wielding, master of preemptive strikes, multi-strike, weapon mastery, beheading sword, xenogenic weapon mastery, whip, super ferocious attack, super whirlwind slash, super cleave, instant cast spell, telekinesis. Spell-like abilities, freely cast, blasphemy, freely cast, soul assimilation, freely cast, telekinesis, freely cast, mind manipulation, 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 and freely cast, implosion. As the top Baelor Lord, Sauron's strength had reached a bottleneck. In other words, he had now evolved into a mature Baelor. Basically, he had obtained most of the skills that he could master, and all kinds of spells had been upgraded to the maximum. In this case, Sauron did not have much room for improvement. A part of his strength was fed back to his demon incarnation, which gave him the ability to control the death domain. However, because the Baelor form had reached the upper limit, Sauron did not gain any new abilities. Instead, he gained a small increase in all aspects of his attributes. For example, his strength had exceeded the upper limit of the Baelor, and his constitution was comparable to a dragon. His perception and charm had also increased to about 30 points because he was a leader. For now, there was only one way for Sauron to continue improving his strength, and that was to advance into the Baelor's special class, such as the Executioner and Beheader. Sauron already had some ideas about this. As a super-large creature, Sauron was nearly 7 meters tall when he stood up. Fortunately, the decorative wings of the succubus allowed him to fly a little. If not, it would be difficult to put on clothes for him. After putting on his armor with the help of a group of succubus maids, Sauron turned around and walked toward the front of the huge palace. His army was gathering. In the Forgotten Land and Naratel, a steady stream of demon army was gathering near the teleportation gate because the great demon Lord Sauron was summoning them. Chapter 1097. The 421st layer of the Abyss, the White Kingdom. This was the ideal kingdom that the ghouls yearned for. Countless ghouls from other planes tried to create their own White Kingdom, but only this place was the ghouls' true paradise. However, for other living creatures, this place was very dangerous and terrifying. Because there were countless starving nether transformation ghouls here, and they'd done everything they could to satisfy their stomachs. To them, endless food was the most wonderful thing. This was the territory of the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen. As the most powerful ghoul, he first served Orcus, then was forced to submit to the Gnoll King, Yeenagu, and paid tribute to him for a long time. Now, the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, was free. This freedom was because Sauron had completely killed Orcus, and he had just betrayed the Gnoll King, Yeenagu, and no demon lord was willing to help him. As if he had a premonition of Sauron's attack, the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, called back most of his servants, including the ghouls that were raging in the material plane. He needed these servants to protect his kingdom. The White Kingdom was white. This was not an idiom, but a general reference to the land of the bottomless abyss. Here, the ghouls were the absolute rulers. Any mortals, devils, demons, and demons were potential food for them. The abyssal blood pool here wasn't to nurture demons, but to provide an endless supply of meat for the ghouls. Outside the palace of the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen was a pale wilderness. Countless bones were buried in it. These were the flesh and blood of the ghouls. Most of them were demon bones, and a few were the remains of other creatures. Accompanied by a blood-red light, a door opened. Sauron's burly figure appeared on this piece of land, and behind him was an endless army of demons that were entering. In order to attack this layer completely dominated by ghouls, Sauron gathered a demon army of nearly 300,000. The huge demon army stretched for dozens of miles, and it would take half a day just to enter here. Master. A demon assassin appeared in front of Sauron and said in a deep voice, "The Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, is hiding in his fortress." Sauron gazed into the distance. It was a pale white skeletal fortress, built from the bones of countless creatures, including the skeleton of a giant dragon. For thousands of years, the king of ghouls, Dor-Isen, was at the level of a ruler. His core servants were the nether ghouls, and the best of them would evolve into barbarians with violent strength. For thousands of years, countless living beings had been eaten by ghouls. Their remains were buried in the ground beneath their feet. Because there were so many skeletons, the entire country seemed to be white. Ghouls fed on any flesh and blood. There was nothing in the abyss that they did not eat. Even if it was an undead with flesh, they would still take a few bites out of endless hunger. There was a huge army of ghouls here. There were some low-grade ghouls without intelligence in the periphery. They were like wild dogs in the wilderness of the White Kingdom. When some of them advanced to become nether ghouls, they would be brought to the inner parts of the White Kingdom and enslaved by Dor-Isen. They would then be kept in captivity. The main task of this demon lord was to eat and find food. Because he was driven out by endless hunger, in order to get enough food, the ghouls would often attack the Taurens of the abyss. An adult Tauren of the abyss was enough for the ghouls to eat for a long time, and to the ghouls, the Taurens' meat was delicious. The endless demon army arrived through teleportation. Under Sauron's command, they advanced towards the White Kingdom. The low-grade ghouls in the periphery did not need Dor-Isen's command. After sensing the smell of flesh and blood, they swarmed over. However, what was different from the past was that the demons they were facing were not newborn demons and were few in number. Now, they were facing a huge army of demons. Crush them. The six-armed snake demon leader roared excitedly and led the army to charge towards the ghouls in front of him. Countless ghouls blocked their vision. The law of this plane had been distorted by Dor-Isen, and the demons had become the main source of food. This subconscious made them gather crazily. The battle broke out. Tens of thousands of low-grade demons rushed towards the ghouls in front of them and quickly killed them or were killed by them. Countless corpses were left in the wilderness of the White Kingdom. Sauron's demon leader advanced step by step. Soon, hundreds of thousands of ghouls were destroyed, until they encountered some huge grayish-white ghouls. Nether ghouls. Dor-Isen's main army was also the backbone of the ghouls. As they gradually approached the White Kingdom, everything in front of them turned gray-white. These were the ashes left behind after the death of the creatures. The land under Sauron's feet was called the Dead Wilderness. All the buildings here were made of bones. Walking on the road, clouds of ashes were kicked up. The white ashes covered the whole city in a white coat. The residents here were ghouls and other undead creatures that loved flesh. Within the range of the naked eye, there were also ghouls, Boda ghouls, and so on. They were all servants of Dor-Isen. Sauron's demon army advanced at an unstoppable pace until a huge white bone wall appeared in front of them. This was the palace of the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, the White Kingdom. The whole kingdom was filled with a strong smell of death. A large number of nether ghouls gathered together. They were like wild beasts waiting for orders, ready to pounce on the demon army in front of them. Dor-Isen's figure was high in the palace. But at this moment, there was a trace of fear and madness in his eyes. He saw countless demons. This demon army had a large number of six-armed Nagas, Balers, Glabrizu, and Soul Judgment demons. Any one of these high-grade demons could kill a large number of ghouls. Take this place for the Great Master. The killing made the six-armed Nagas crazy. They roared excitedly and led the violent demon army to attack the wall in front of them. The towering white bone wall could not stop the demons' footsteps. Countless demons that could fly and climb quickly rushed into it. The benefits made these demons crazy because they knew that after conquering this kingdom, Sauron would infect some secondary demon lords, and these demon lords would be selected from those with outstanding military achievements. Dozens of legendary demons turned their eyes to the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen. If they could kill the enemy leader, there would be a place for them among the new secondary demon lords. Chapter 1098. The attack of the demons was like a surging tide. Even the ghouls could not withstand this endless attack. In the face of so many middle-grade and high-grade demons, the walls of the White Kingdom quickly fell. Then, the buildings made of bones were flattened by the demons. Sauron did not even have to do anything, and his subordinates fought all the way to the front of the palace. The guards here were the followers of the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen, who were the barbarians promoted from the Nether Ghouls. They were huge and looked like crazy hyenas. The Ghoul King was still the same as before. Its body was straight, unlike the other ghouls. Its eyes shone with a pale green light. It wore a luxurious robe and leather armor, wore a white bone crown, and held a spine-shaped staff called the Hungry Tooth Staff. Sauron's figure came out. A raging fire ignited on his body. He pulled out a huge beheading sword from the void and then walked toward the Ghoul King, Dor-Isen. Teams of Baelor demons joined the battle. In the White Kingdom, the ghouls were making their last struggle, and Sauron was going to kill their king. Body of flame. Endless fire covered a radius of nearly 100 meters. Sauron held the giant beheading sword and approached step by step. The ground under his feet quickly melted into semi-crystals, and the terrible heat caused cracks to appear on the white bone palace. Roar. Under the threat of death, the Ghoul King let out a low roar full of bestiality. It could no longer maintain its human appearance. Its body involuntarily bent, and at the same time, sharp fangs appeared. It looked like a fierce ghoul ready to pounce on its prey. Behind it, the gorgeous robe was covered with strange energy. This was the Magic Mouth Cloak, an evil equipment that could attack the enemy. The Ghoul King had the ability to hunger and rage, which could greatly increase its combat power. It also had the power to awaken the undead, but at present, this ability was useless. Dor-Isen had just tried to summon the undead, and these undead were quickly burned by Sauron's body of flame. No one could defeat the Baelor Lord with cannon fodder. Even if there were thousands of cannon fodder, they were nothing but dust in front of Sauron. They would all die if they got close to him. The Ghoul King's body was being burned by the flames. The undead were naturally afraid of fire. During the battle with Sauron, Dor-Isen, the king of ghouls, was constantly in the fire. He could only use evil aura to protect himself from the fire. Boom! The confrontation between the two demon overlords began in an instant. Sauron's huge body stood motionless, while the Ghoul King's figure was sent flying. Crushing power. As a gigantic otherworldly life form, perhaps only giant dragons could withstand Sauron's crushing power. Sauron didn't care about the spells flying toward him. He just opened up a negative energy shield and stood in place to resist the enemy's attacks. His strength was far beyond that of the Ghoul King, not to mention that he could borrow the power of his main body. There were no accidents in this battle, but it would take some time for it to end. Outer Islands, Mordor City. After spending about 3 days, the construction of a somewhat special temple was completed. A lot of resources had been allocated to the construction of this temple. Not only had a large number of witches and golems been used, but the city hall had also allocated a lot of manpower and resources. The temple covered an area of about 5 acres. In front of him was a small courtyard with a fountain in the middle. The pillars of the temple were made of 1 meter thick marble, and on both sides stood a pair of black cat sculptures. The eyes were carved with precious stones and looked very lifelike. There were no murals inside the temple. These were all completed by the priests later on. In the middle of the temple was a prayer altar, and in front of it was a statue of a cute cat-human girl. That was right. This was Lulu's temple. As Soren's vassal god, her shrine was built on the right side of the giant god temple, like a satellite that protected the main shrine. Currently, Lulu's church was very small. It only had about 100 or 200 people. Some of them were creatures who were being guided, while the others were mortals who served. Lulu didn't have many responsibilities. But in the underworld, there was a team of death servants at her disposal. Her current main task was to ensure that the souls reached the underworld. When the temple was completed, Sauron had also come here and left his mark here with his blessing. Because she was Sauron's vassal god, some of his believers' faith would be transferred here when they prayed and sacrificed. Most of the vassal gods didn't have a large church, so part of their divine power relied on the main god. For now, Lulu's learning progress was very fast. She could already bestow level 1 to 5 divine spells to priests. But as a new god, she still needed a long time to grow. When she could bestow level 1 to 8 divine spells to her believers, Lulu would be truly qualified. Under normal circumstances. Unless one was a god's chosen or a god's chosen, they couldn't use divine spells above level 9. If a believer's strength was close to legendary, then a god with weak divine power would basically turn them into a god's chosen. This was because these believers were incomparably important to them. Bottomless Abyss, 421st floor, White Kingdom. Along with the Ghoul King, Dorison's unwilling roar, his body turned into charcoal in the fire. Countless divine light appeared, most of it poured into Sauron's body, while a small part flew to the others. The Ghoul King, Dorison's domain was chaos, evil, illusion, trickery, and hunger. The power of chaos was repelled by Sauron, and the power of evil was absorbed by him. The same was true for illusion, and trickery was integrated into Sauron's body. As for hunger, it was completely repelled by the surviving ghouls. After that, the ghouls who had obtained divinity began to frantically escape. This demon lord couldn't bring Sauron too many benefits. Because of the repelling power, Sauron only obtained a new domain, trickery. As for the other powers, most of them were absorbed by the demons, especially the chaos domain, which was the dominant one. Some of the nearby demons even advanced. Raise this place. Sauron frowned and withdrew his sword. Then he ordered, kill all the ghouls. Prepare to restore the abyss blood pool. The demon incarnation had accumulated a lot of divine power. These powers had not yet been integrated into the main body. Only when Sauron felt that the time was right, when the main body and the demon incarnation were reintegrated, the divine power would merge. After the complete integration, the demon incarnation was like an avatar. It could act alone or cooperate with the main body like the Queen of Spiders and the Lady of Night. Now, the Ghoul King had been eliminated. Sauron's next target was the Gnoll King, Yeenagu. However, before he started, he still needed to win over an important ally. Chapter 1099. Bottomless Abyss, Forgotten Land. In a magnificent and huge palace, teams of demon guards were patrolling. From inside the huge palace came the obscene sounds of succubus maids, but these demon guards all turned a blind eye. This was different from humans. The reproduction of demons did not rely on mating to complete, and the same principle applied to devils. Therefore, mating in the lower planes was a kind of entertainment, and it was entertainment that only high-grade demons could enjoy. But even so, not all demons enjoyed this sport. They were more keen on using killing and fighting to pleasure themselves. After all, the Tanakh-Re demons that now ruled the bottomless abyss were born from greed, destruction, lust, killing, rage, and other emotions. Inside the palace was a super big bed that was nearly 20 meters long. It was covered with soft fur and silk. Ordinary fabrics could not withstand Sauron's tossing. These furs came from ferocious demonic beasts, and the silk was made from the spider silk of the pit purgatory black spider. It had to be said that the spider silk produced in the kingdom of the Queen of Spiders had always been a high-end product in the lower planes. It was traded to the demon lords and archdevils through the demons. 7 or 8 beautiful succubus were lazily lying around the big bed. And the one who was serving Sauron was the succubus lord, Rhinalise. As the first succubus to serve Sauron, she was now a secondary demon lord who ruled over more than 300,000 square kilometers of land. Her status was second only to the red shroud of the bottomless abyss. Master. Rhinalise knelt at Sauron's feet and whispered, "Are you really going to see Cridiana? She doesn't seem to be trustworthy." Sauron looked down at the succubus lord at his feet, smiled and shook his head, and said, I don't want to see her. Succubus had always been like this. After all, they were succubus, Tanakh, demons born from lust. Renalise was afraid that Sister Glory would threaten her position, so when she learned that Sauron was going to see her, she felt uneasy. Sauron did not want to see Sister Radiance. He wanted to see the succubus queen, Mechanut. As a demon god who became a god through lust and taboos, Mechanut was also affected by the Avatar crisis. As a succubus who was not good at head-on fighting, she was smart enough to hide in a safe place. That was the Forgotten Land. Sauron got up and walked out of the palace. Succubus maids would clean up the messy battlefield inside. Soon, groups of demon guards gathered and followed Sauron to the arena. After taking over the White Kingdom, Sauron's territory spanned across 3 levels. It was very difficult for one person to manage such a large territory, so Sauron enfeoffed over a dozen lesser demon lords. These demon lords helped Sauron manage the territory while regularly handing over a portion of their souls and offerings according to the rules. Sauron assigned the territory according to the order of the human kingdom. He did not care about the size of the territory. What he wanted was more demon troops. Thousands of higher demon guards followed Sauron to Sister Glory's territory. After such a long time, the steel fortress here had been rebuilt. Although the strength of the Succubus Legion had been divided, it was still a powerful force in the bottomless abyss. Sister Radiance, Cridiana, welcomed Sauron's arrival. In the face of Sauron, who had become a demon overlord and ruled 3 levels, Cridiana also bowed her head to express her respect. I want to talk to you in private. Sauron waved his hand to signal the demon guards behind him to retreat, then glanced at Cridiana and the higher succubus maids behind her. The expressions of the 2 succubus changed slightly. Then the other demons retreated, leaving only the 3 of them. Should I call you the Queen of Succubus, Mechanut? Sauron's expression had a hint of playfulness, and his eyes fell on the higher succubus behind Cridiana. The other party's identity was exposed early on. But Sauron did not have the strength to show his cards to her in the past, and now he had no fear. Giggle. The higher succubus standing behind Cridiana let out a chuckle, then her figure changed. A mature and gorgeous succubus with long black hair wearing a silk robe appeared in front of him. She was more seductive than the other succubus. There was always a playful smile on her red lips, as if she did not care about anything. Behind her was a tail with sharp barbs. She was the Queen of Succubus, Mechanut. After thousands of years in the abyss, she gradually grew from a small succubus lord to a demon giant. Caution was her motto. Even if it was the Avatar crisis, she had successfully passed through it safely. The radiant sister, Cridiana, stood behind Mechanut. Now that the cards had been laid out, the next step was a deal between the 2 demon giants. As the daughter of Mechanut, she had no right to speak. Mechanut was a special existence. She doted on the succubus and could even tolerate the willfulness of succubus, but she was cruel to other demons. The succubus queen loved to play and abuse her enemies. She was an extremely dangerous and seductive demon lord. Honorable Baelor Lord, Your Excellency Sauron. Mechanut bowed slightly to express her respect, and at the same time, she showed her best curves. As the Queen of Succubus, she was born to know how to seduce males. She smiled and said, "Congratulations on defeating the King of Ghouls, Dorison. Now, your territory can be counted on one hand in the bottomless abyss." Sauron smiled without the slightest pride, as if he didn't care about these results at all, but said seriously, "Your Excellency Mechanut. The Avatar crisis is about to end. Are you still going to hide here? You know, now is the time when your enemy is at his weakest. If you don't kill him now, it will take more than 1,000 years for you to have such a good opportunity." Mechanut's enemy. That was naturally the King of Gnolls, Yeenagu. Sauron had killed the King of Ghouls, Dorison, which was equivalent to cutting off Yeenagu's most powerful claws. The ultimate purpose of his trip was, of course, to persuade the Queen of Succubus to send troops to attack Yeenagu, the King of Gnolls. Hearing Sauron's words, the Queen of Succubus, Mechanut's face changed slightly. Then, she smiled and spread out her hands and said, "As you can see, Your Excellency Sauron, my strength has been greatly reduced. My children thought that I had fallen, and now they have divided my army. I'm just a lone wolf now, and I can only control such a succubus army. I'm afraid it will be difficult to help Your Excellency destroy Yeenoghu." "Cunning bitch." Sauron's mouth twitched, then he smiled and said, "Your Excellency Mechanut is joking. Who doesn't know that you secretly control a powerful demon-absorbing army? On the 570th floor of the Abyss, as far as I know, there is a huge half-demon army there." Hearing Sauron's words, Mechanut's face finally changed slightly. Because he casually pointed out two of Mechanut's biggest trump cards, and these were also important guarantees for her to regain her power. "P.S. I'm back. Resume the update." Chapter 1100. Macanthus was definitely the most difficult bitch to deal with in the multiverse. She had many lovers over the long years. In addition to the fallen Demogorgon, there were also Pazuzu. Between them, there were many powerful succubus descendants, including the mysterious Red Shroud who ruled the region, Mestville, the king of the patrolling hunters, the owner of Macanthus's steel fortress Van Ellen in the first layer of the Abyss, Pazunia, and Sokos Benoist, the embodiment of lust and taboo. He coveted the throne of Graz, ZT, and formed an alliance with Macanthus in order to achieve this goal. In the end, he was killed by Macanthus. This was also the source of Macanthus's current priesthood. This succubus queen was definitely not trustworthy, but in order to deal with Yeenoghu, Sauron also needed her strength. Macanthus could not help but fall into silence when she heard Sauron's words. Sauron knew that Macanthus was tempted and immediately said, "Yeenoghu is very close to your territory. If you don't kill him while he is weak, he will continue to harass and attack your territory in the future. As long as you defeat him, I can promise you half of the spoils, including his territory." The benefits promised by Sauron were like the last straw that broke the balance. Macanthus finally raised her head and showed a charming smile. She clapped her hands gently and said, "I agree. You're right, this is indeed a rare opportunity." Clap, clap, clap. There was a crisp clap, and then a white portal appeared. "At your service, Your Excellency Succubus Queen." A huge meatball appeared in front of them. It was an eye demon that exuded a dangerous aura and a weak divinity. Her eye root was different from all the other eye demons because she was an advanced eye demon observer. Her creature level was close to level 30, which was more powerful than many secondary demon lords in the Abyss. The eye demon observer had a special space power that could easily teleport in the Abyss. It glanced at Sauron next to it and then flew in front of Mechanut. It was Mechanthut's think tank and also Mechanthut's military governor. The eye demon observer helped her monitor her kingdom and legion, and was careful to be vigilant against those who had bad intentions. Mechanthut was smart enough not to use the succubus as a military governor. The eye demon observer not only monitored the other succubus, but also the Radiance nuns. "Gather my half-demon army." Mechanthut glanced at Sauron and said, "It's time for Yeenoghu to pay the price for what he did in the past." In the bottomless abyss, benefits were the only thing that mattered. Sauron convinced Mechanut, and she also believed that the two powerful demon lords would completely eliminate the enemy. "Very good." Sauron stretched out his hand with a smile and said, "Then, we only need to recruit one more target. Who else should he rope in?" Mechanthut just thought for a moment and knew who it was. The old enemy of the Knoll King, Yeenoghu, the Tauren King, Buffett, the demon lord of the 600th floor of the Abyss, and the monarch of the Purgatory Tauren. His followers and servants were mainly Taurens and Trolls. A demon lord who was not powerful but had fought with Yeenoghu for thousands of years. When Yeenoghu was still weak, he could not destroy Buffett, the Tauren King. But when Yeenoghu was strong enough to destroy him, Buffett, the Tauren King's secret supporter, also appeared. That was the terrible Tsang-Yi, the mother of demons in the bottomless abyss. She was the mother of many demon lords, including the Dark Monarch, the Shadow Demon Queen, and so on. In the Scroll of Darkness of Oman, she was called the mother of the entire Tanar'ri race, but this was not recognized by many demon lords. One thing for sure was that Sangyi liked to seduce powerful demons and find ways to give birth to offspring. The number of these offspring was huge, but not many survived. Among them, only 3 to 5 became demon lords. Through Sangyi, the Taoran king Buffett came into contact with the even more ancient demon lord, Chrysalis Sovereign. After spending some time with the Chrysalis Sovereign, Buffett built the Tower of Jurisprudence and began to cultivate and create a unique demon that he came up with. Legend has it that it was a mutated bull demon. Buffett, the Taoran king, had always wanted to join forces with Mekanthet because of his hatred for Yeenagu. But for some unknown reason, Mekanthet rejected him several times, so the Taoran king Buffett gradually gave up on this idea. "Do you want to pull Buffett, the Taoran king?" Mekanthet frowned and murmured, "He is a good chess piece and helper. However, I hate Mother Night who is standing behind him." Sure enough, it was because of Sangyi. Sauron also heard that Buffett, the Taoran king, tried to form an alliance with Mekanthet to deal with Yeenagu, but Mekanthet refused several times. The reason was the same as Sauron guessed. The succubus queen did not like Sangyi, the ancient demon. Sangye's real body was hidden under the shroud. It looked like a delicate woman's body, but in fact, Sangye's real body was so terrifying that her body refused to accept herself. Anyone who opened the shroud and wanted to see the real face of the mother of demons had to make a fortitude exemption of more than 34 difficulty. Success meant that before he saw the real face, another strand of fluttering shroud covered the gap. Failure meant that he saw the truth and died on the spot. Sauron was not interested in why Mekanthet hated Sangyi. He just looked at the succubus queen in front of him and said slowly, "Yeenagu is much stronger than before. He stole the power of the demon Orbis, and as far as I know, he got a very dangerous artifact. We need more cannon fodder." Yeenagu's own power was not strong in the abyss. But Yeenagu was a lucky guy. There was a very ancient demon Orbis on his level, a half-dead ancient demon lord. Yeenagu rose quickly and collected a very powerful artifact. That was, Flail of Time. This artifact had a total of 5 heads. Soren got 2 of them and gave them to his saint necromancer, Milan, but the other 3 heads had fallen into the hands of Yeenagu. This made Yeenagu's combat power greatly increased. In a head-on battle, almost no one could withstand the crushing attack of the Flail of Time. Fortunately, he had only obtained 3 heads. If he had obtained all 5 heads, the Flail of Time would have completely surpassed Pale Justice and the Holy Avenger in terms of pure lethality in melee combat. To some extent. The complete version of the Flail of Time was the artifact with the highest damage in the material plane, the most stable damage, and the most damage attributes. Poison, fire, ice, electricity, acid. During the period when the Son of Massacre was active, the +5 Flail of Time was the artifact with the highest damage in close combat. Chapter 1101. The 600th Floor of the Abyss. Persuading Bafeman, the Taoran king, was easier than Solon imagined. This demon lord had hated Yeenagu, the Knoll king, for thousands of years, so when there was a chance to completely destroy this enemy, he agreed without any hesitation. Especially after Yeenagu's strength grew and often invaded his territory, the Taoran king Buffett had already thought of a counterattack while Yeenagu's strength was weakened. The Minotaur king was 12 feet tall when he stood up. His body was bulky and huge. His muscles were exaggerated under his thick black hair. His head looked like a demonic bull's head. His huge, forward-curving horns were stained with the blood of countless victims. His hoof-like feet and a bull-like tail made his beast-like appearance even more ferocious. This Taoran king was not a very powerful demon lord. However, his challenge rating was also level 24. Defeating him was about the same as fighting an ancient dragon alone. He rarely left his maze. At most, he would send out his avatar. Therefore, the challenge rating to kill him should be around level 30. This demon lord created Bray, Tauren, and Tauren. To some extent, he was not as weak as he looked on the surface. He had the ability to extract his own blood and recreate new demon species like Sauron created the demon hunters. The Tauren King Buffett's voice was dull and heavy. He was a demon lord full of fighting desire. Perhaps he was a demon born from anger. Because he and the race he created had violent power, there were a large number of barbarians among the followers of the Tauren King Buffett. "I agree to your alliance agreement," the Tauren King Buffett said in a deep voice. Sauron proposed a temporary alliance. They swore by the river Styx to deal with Yeenoghu together, and the spoils of war would be distributed according to the results of the battle. In order to ensure that everyone had their own gains, after defeating Yeenoghu, they would divide the levels into 3 pieces. Sauron's burly body looked taller than the Tauren King Buffett. The Balor itself was one of the largest demons in the abyss. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "Very good. Then you can prepare to gather your own army. We will attack in 3 days." They had to kill Yeenoghu as soon as possible. This was because the army of the Baator Inferno had begun to move. Although the outer regions of the material plane were still considered peaceful, there seemed to be frequent devil activity in other places. The final wave of impact was about to arrive. The true elites of the devils had yet to appear, and the ones that appeared now were just small fries. When the devils confirmed that the strength of the material plane had plummeted, the army of devils that had occupied most of the 10,000 abyss planes on the first level of the abyss would be mobilized. By then, they would only leave a small part of their army to guard the place, while the rest would go to the material plane to wage war. Sauron must kill Yeenoghu. In this way, he could smoothly take over the steel fortresses controlled by Yeenoghu on the first and second layers of the abyss. As for Yeenoghu's original territory, he did not care much about it. The 422nd level of the bottomless abyss was still too low. Sauron's Order evil faction wasn't suitable for occupying too deep a level. The higher the level in the bottomless abyss, the bigger it would be. At the same time, it would be easier to accommodate creatures from other factions. Most of the evil demons were active in the first 50 levels of the bottomless abyss. They wouldn't go any further than that unless it was an important transaction. Time passed very quickly. In the distant city of Moder, when the army of devils in the Galumba arena began to gather, a huge beheading sword finally took shape in the temple of Moder. Soul Slayer, Dark Demon Sword. Endless death aura emanated from this supergiant beheading sword. It was integrated with the power of the Staff of Orcus, and at the same time, it was recast by Sauron with divinity. Its weight reached an astonishing 2 tons. When it was swung, it was like a heavy mortar. It could easily destroy a city wall that was several meters thick. This divine artifact was endowed with the power of the Lord of Death. The enemies killed by it could be resurrected as undead. At the same time, it also had the power to imprison souls. The number of souls imprisoned could reach about 3,000. When charged to a certain extent, the imprisoned souls would become vengeful spirits and be released to bite the enemy. At the same time, it could also awaken a group of 50 skeleton warriors. This was a divine artifact made by Sauron himself, and only the devil incarnation could use it. Before attacking Yeenoghu, he sent this divine artifact to the bottomless abyss. The 422nd floor of the bottomless abyss. Because the territory of Dor-Isen, the king of ghouls, had been taken, 421st floor, Sauron could easily lead the devil army directly to Yeenoghu's territory. The king of gnolls, Yeenoghu's biggest dream was to see his people, the gnolls, prosper. He imagined a main material plane controlled by his people, where elves, humans, dwarves, and halflings were just slaves and food for the gnolls. However, he knew that the gnolls in the main material plane could not achieve this goal, so he strongly supported the believers of other races who worshipped him. The leader of the mysterious Morrowind family was once one of his most powerful human believers at that time, but under the planning of the succubus queen, Mechanut, the family was destroyed in an internal strife. From that day on, the king of gnolls, Yeenoghu regarded the succubus queen as his greatest enemy and periodically attacked the territory of the succubus queen. Today, the king of gnolls, Yeenoghu, was facing a huge challenge. Because outside the ancient city of Yeenoghu, a huge army appeared in front of him. The Purgatory Tower, an army from the 600th floor of the bottomless abyss, the half-succubus army from the 570th floor of the bottomless abyss, and the devil army from the 3rd floor of the bottomless abyss. It was a little different from the other floors of the bottomless abyss. The ancient city of Yeenagoo had a large number of human slaves, which were all obtained by the King of Knolls from other planes. This was a very smart and far-sighted demon lord. About 2,000 years ago, he had been keeping humans, dwarves, elves, halflings, and other races in captivity. These were all races that accidentally entered the bottomless abyss and were bewitched into the abyss. Yeenagoo turned them into slaves and kept them in captivity. At the same time, he found ways to let these slaves gradually reproduce, and the largest number of them were humans. He enslaved these human slaves with cruel rule. Almost every year, some human slaves died, and these dead people were food for the Knolls. Only in rare cases would Yeenagoo reward the Knolls with living human slaves, and these human slaves often did not live long. He kept other races in captivity for the Knolls as slave labor and as rations for the Knolls. Chapter 1102. The 422nd layer of the abyss, the Dark Prairie. Yeenagoo, the king of Knolls, occupied this place and built the city of Yeenagoo here. The building that was the size of a human city was placed on a massive stone roller, allowing it to roam the entire plane, guided by thousands of slaves plundered from the prime material plane and other planes. According to rough estimates, this palace would cruise in a counterclockwise direction to the 3 permanent campsites in this area every year, stopping near the dormant Obilus demon lord Bashar's huge body, so that Yeenagoo could have a telepathic discussion with it, and finally replace the slaves who died in the overwork of dragging the capital of this layer at the gathering gate. Most of the dead slaves became rations for the Knolls. The entire city of Yeenagoo would move in a counterclockwise direction. However, this city belonged to the King of Knolls. In addition, there were 3 permanent campsites on this level, where a large number of slaves and Knolls were kept. Master. A tall succubus maid descended from the sky and whispered to Sauron, Yeenagoo, the king of Knolls, has moved his city to Barchad's End. A large number of Knolls and slave legions have gathered there. He seems to want to fight us there. Barchad's End. When he heard this name, Sauron's face changed slightly. Because this was the body of an incomparably ancient Obilus demon lord. This huge body was still exposed on this level, like the body of a giant whale stranded on a beach. Yeenagoo should want to use the power of Barchad to deal with us. The figure of the succubus queen, Mechanut, appeared and frowned. The rise of Yeenagoo is inseparable from this ancient Obilus demon. He is wary of anyone who is close to Barchad. The Storm Lord had a very terrifying power when he was alive. Even after death, his power has completely changed the structure of this plane. Sauron was silent. Of course, he knew this ancient Obilus demon lord, but this was not a reason to retreat. He looked at the succubus queen and said in a deep voice, "One person is responsible for a permanent campsite, and eventually gather the army to attack Barchad's End." There was a lot of territory on this level. There were believers of Yeenagoo and other dangerous predators in the vicinity, and the greedy undead creatures belonging to the Ghoul King, Dor-Ison, bred in the Howling Peaks. Although the Ghoul King, Dor-Ison, had fallen, Yeenagoo still controlled a huge army of ghouls. He had been exploiting Dor-Ison's surplus value for thousands of years. At this level, he had raised thousands of ghouls to help him guard the slaves of other races. Dark Prairie. This vast territory had countless wild Knolls, coyotes, carrion-eating coyotes, as well as many violent beasts gathering. There were several important locations on this level. They were Barchad's End, Azar's Ruins, Shrieking Peaks, Oozing Forest, Gathering Gate, and Cursed Throat. The king was demon was Barchad's. There were huge slave markets in these places, and Yeenagoo could always think of ways to capture slaves from other planes. Soon, the succubus queen and the Minotaur king chose a place to attack. There was only one place left except for the Yeenagoo city. That was the Gate of Assembly. This level was heavily guarded, and it was also Yeenagoo's most important stronghold. The Gate of Assembly was a huge circular teleportation portal. It allowed two-way access to many main material planes known to Yenagu. Not only the material plane where Soren's body was, but also the origin of the orcs, as well as other material planes, such as the hometown of Mordenkainen. This was a huge teleportation portal that took countless energy and wealth to build, and it preserved many important space waymarks. The gnolls, who belonged to the evil Church of Yenagu, would be transported to the realm of Yenagu through the portal. Here, these slaves would either join the poor people who were forced to pull the king's magnificent fortress, or even worse, be thrown into the wilderness as food for those demon-like beasts. The gnolls were a creature that reproduced in many planes. As the ruler of this race, Yenagu could lock many planes through his believers, which was one of his advantages. The Gate of Assembly held a large number of troops. However, it was clear that the core force had been mobilized to Barchid's end, and Yenagu hoped to fight them there to the death. Sauron's army easily occupied this place. And the price he paid was only the death of about 30,000 low-level demons. For Sauron, who now controlled many levels of the bottomless abyss, sacrificing tens of thousands of low-level demons was nothing. Because his demon army was replenishing tens of thousands of troops every day. If he wanted, Sauron could gather millions of demons in an instant. But these low-level demons could only be used as cannon fodder. They were not very useful, and it was not cost-effective to bring them across plains. Is this the Gate of Assembly? Sauron came to the huge circular portal. He felt the aura of space. This portal had existed before Yenagu became a demon lord. According to his judgment, it should have been built by the older Orbis demons. At that time, the powerful Orbis demons liked to invade other planes very much. There were more than a dozen plane waymarks in the portal. 3 of them were connected to material planes, namely the main material plane, the origin of the Orcs' Gate, and Mordenkainen's home. Mordenkainen was a legendary mage who liked to wander. The spells created by him were spread across many planes. He was a wizard who could rival the gods, although no one knew where he was wandering in the multiverse. Sauron let the demon army occupy this place. Then, he recorded the space waymarks of this ancient portal. There were more than 30 planes connected to it. Except for the upper planes that could not be reached, almost all the lower planes, as well as many astral planes and material planes. Such a portal could not be built by Yenagu. He only used this ancient portal to help himself plunder slaves from other planes, which was why Yenagu had a large number of human slaves. Other material planes? Sauron looked at the huge portal in front of him and murmured, maybe it will be useful in the future. It was not easy to spread faith across planes. Because it was extremely easy to arouse the hostility of other gods. The Queen of Spiders was a successful propagator of faith across planes, but this was only because she was a god of her race. As long as there were drows in the plane, there would be her faith. This was difficult for other gods to replicate. Gods crossing planes often led to terrible wars, such as the fall of Muhammad, the Battle of the Orcs' Gate, the destruction of the Ilmaid Empire, and so on. However, this was not impossible for Soren because he was the Lord of Death. If he spent more energy to spread faith to other planes, it would not be difficult. The soul would eventually return to the river Styx. P.S. Not today. That's all. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.